Bloomington has seen rain, sleet, and snow this winter, but today it's a beautiful day for racing. The defending champs Black Key Bulls come in looking for a repeat. SAE, led by Joe Korhulik, is looking to get back on top. SIGAP is looking strong as well, with 3 riders in the top 10 of ITTs. But it's Cutters, the pole sitters, who they will all be chasing in a wide open field of teams vying for the Borg Warner Trophy. It's 1 year of training for 1 day in April. This is the 68th running of the men's Little 500. Very pleasant good afternoone and welcome to Bill Armstrong Stadium. I'm Josh Eastern, joined by Jordan Bailey. Happy to be back with you once again for another race. And Jordan, it's a beautiful day for racing. It's race day.
Josh, there's no place I would rather be than here in Bloomington in the month of April. Little 500, it's an IU tradition, 68 years of history. There's the bikes, the cinders, the pageantry. Everything is here. We are ready to go. These riders have trained for the last year and are ready to take part in an event that's been going on since 1951.
Yeah, this is an absolutely fun day of racing. And you're a race director, you're a rider. What are the emotions on race day?
Well, you are training all year round for it. It's a singular focus, and now it's ready. You're ready to unleash. And I think that I grew a great appreciation, even more so as race director of the Little 500 for 5 years out of school. And in that way, you get to see the behind the scenes. You get to see the alumni coming back to Nix and all the camaraderie that goes into it. We were down in the pits earlier today, talking to the Betas, talking to the Delta Chis, talking to the Cutters, the Black Key Bulls. They all are obsessed in a way with this event, and it brings people back, and it's the community and the connection point to Indiana University.
But this race today, so much parity. I mean, we saw it on Quals Day. It was a crazy day at Quals Day. Awful weather. You were there. I was there. What did we see on that day? Because it was just awful, awful weather.
Well, Josh, I was glad that you and I got to see it from the comfort of inside of the press box. Outside on the track, it was every which way of bad, cold, disgusting weather. Glad I wasn't riding it. Glad I wasn't working it. But at the end of the day, the kind of the good teams were towards the front, the bad teams were towards the back, and we get here today, and now it's just such a treat that we have a good race day, great conditions, and we're ready to go.
And it's a wide open field. And I think that's going to make it for a really, really exciting race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday was very uncommon. We saw 11 teams on the lead lap for the women's race. And it was a wild sprint, Kappa Alpha Theta taking the victory. And I think that it's going to be mimicked very similarly on the men's side today. Wide open field, we have our favorites, but I think that there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be sneaking up there, and they can take the checkered flag at lap 200.
It should be a very exciting race. But we're going to welcome the third member of our team, Eddie Cotton, who has more on the field.
Thank you very much, Josh. Now, you mentioned it. That Quals weather was absolutely terrible. We had rain, we had snow, and we had wind. And because of that, we see more than a few teams that are rather talented in the field lower down in the qualifications. I'm talking about Beta, I'm talking about 3PH, and I'm talking about Bears. So talking to a bunch of the teams before the race, I'd expect those teams to get very aggressive early on and try and push for that lead lap within the first few laps. But today, the weather is absolutely beautiful. We're hitting 60 degrees outside, partly cloudy, but one thing to note, we've got about 10-mile-per-hour winds coming in from the east, which is something the riders aren't fully adjusted to because most of their practices, they're expecting that wind to come in from the west. So that'll be something to watch throughout the rest of this race. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Eddie. It should be a great day for racing, and one of those great teams is wearing the white jersey this year. It's Sigma Phi Epsilon.
Sigma Phi Epsilon, they won last in 2015, came in, and this is their first time in the white jersey. White jersey being indicative of their spring series championship victory. They had 3 in the top 10 of ITTs. They ended up winning Team Pursuit. That's an event. That was a big deal. That's an event that the Black Key Bulls have more or less owned since 2014. So that means SIGAP is coming in with great fitness. They have a great roster of riders in Charlie Hicks and a couple other to fill out the rest of the field.
Yeah, I mean, 3 riders in the top 10 of ITTs. They dominated the spring series. And for more on Sigma Phi Epsilon, let's take a look at this package. 3 riders in the top 10 of ITTs, the winner of Missing Out and Team Pursuit champs. It's been quite the spring for SIGAP Cycling. Still, this team has higher expectations.
We're all returners, we're all hungry this year, and I think we're showing that in all of our training, and it's really coming through in events.
It's really nice having 3 guys throughout the winter and even in the fall that can push each other.
They've been successful nearly every time they've taken to the track this spring.
The 3 riders in the top 10 of ITTs shows how dangerous this SIGEP team can be.
It certainly looks good, and that was exactly our goal, was to put 3 in the top 10, just to kind of show the depth that we have. And it kind of gives us a lot of weapons come race day that we can use.
SIGEP's top 3 riders are all upperclassmen. However, Ben Harris is the only rider with actual race experience. He says that will help him.
I really gained a lot from last year. I feel much more comfortable on the track, much more confident in my abilities.
Really, since winning the race in 2015, we've kind of had a strong legacy team dynamic since then. You know, alumni are still around the team helping us out, which helps new guys like me a lot. You know, although I haven't raced, I feel like I have quite a bit of experience under my belt.
SIGEP will be starting from the 4th spot. Can the white jersey win the race for the 2nd straight year?
We don't want to leave the race knowing that we could have left something else out there. So we're just going to put 100% out there and see what happens.
So Sigma Phi Epsilon going to be a fun team to watch today. 3 riders in the top 10 of ITTs. We just mentioned it. I mean, they dominated the Spring Series.
And Charlie Hicks has fitness. He won Missing Out. That's the Sprinters event. So they have a lot of weapons and tools that they can use. Perhaps they'll go off the front and try and win it breaking away. Perhaps they will just play it smart to the chest and go for that sprint finish at the end with Charlie.
Tom Settle mentioned in that package the 2015 win. Eddie is down on the field with one of those winners.
Thanks, guys. I'm here with Nick Torrance from the 2015 race. And just tell me a little bit about what you look back on and your memories as a Little 5 rider.
Well, you know, Little 5 was something I put my whole college experience and my whole heart and soul into while I was here. You know, it was 4 years, you know, of training and sacrifices and dedication, you know, and like all leading up to, you know, the last race in my senior year. So, you know, it was just a great time, great experience, made a lot of great friends.
Now, what does it mean to be back here supporting your team as an alumni?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's a little bit less stressful, I'll say, you know. Obviously, I'd love to be on the track competing still, but it's nice to be able to come back. You know, Little 5 is a special time for Bloomington and, you know, just IU campus in general. So it's great to be able to come back and support in a different way.
Now, you look at this team this year, and they've got a bunch of competitive riders. They're part of the favorites here. What are your expectations for the race?
Oh, I mean, anything less than a win, I think, would be a disappointment. You know, they looked great. We're in white for a reason. They had a great spring. They're fit. They're ready to go. They're dialed in.
All right, perfect. Thanks a lot. Best of luck.
Yeah,
Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Want to bring in another special guest. It's Dan Smith, the president and CEO of the IU Foundation. Dan, welcome. It's race day. It's probably great to be here.
Great to see you, and what a special day we have. You know, the weather's great. The riders have trained hard. I'm so proud of the Student Foundation. They've done so much to make this come off like a Swiss watch. So we're looking forward to an exciting day, and again, as always, first and foremost, a safe day.
Mm-hmm. And this is a great day for racing. Obviously, a great spectacle for Indiana University. What does this mean for you and the foundation?
Well, I think above all, it's what it means for the university. I mean, this is hands down one of the finest events of its kind in the nation. Indiana University should be the type of university hosting such an event. It showcases our students. It's a student-run event from start to finish, and so it means an awful lot. From the foundation standpoint, they raise money for scholarships, particularly for students facing emergencies while they're here as students, and you know what a great cause. So we've got great students, a great environment, a great culture around it, and a superb cause for support. So
and it's the history and tradition too.
It is.
It goes back to 1951. You've got the steering committee, the riders, the volunteers, and it just keeps going and going and going and cycling through. And you know, you can replace the riders, and you can replace some of those volunteers, but it just keeps going. You know, long after you're gone, long after I'm gone, it'll continue to keep on going, right?
Absolutely. And you know, for those of you off camera, you know, we've got Jordan Bailey with us that you just heard from, and I mean, he's been a mainstay of the Little 500 for many years, and it's just great how the alums come back, Jordan, and continue to support this special event.
I mean, this is such a special event, and we were talking with some coaches down there, and they said it's just kind of an evergreen event. It really doesn't change. Yep. They're all 18 to 22-year-old riders, and they just kind of keep recycling through.
That's right, and it's eagerly anticipated. I mean, it's on the university calendar. I put this up there with graduation day.
For sure.
That it's that big of an event in the lives of the students and the life of the university.
So it should be a great day for racing. I mean, this couldn't be better weather. We had an awful weather winter, and all of a sudden it's a great day.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we talk about the leadership skills that our students get in putting this on, and I mean, they were anticipating everything. They have to anticipate rain, snow, wind, and unfortunately we got just perfect conditions, and also for the women's race yesterday.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Just great.
And you worked to help put this on. You raised a lot of money, but what's your relationship with the Student Foundation and really putting this event on?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I try to stay out of their way, actually. So as the former dean of the Kelly School here, I do a lot with students in general on leadership development, and that's really where I intersect with them, is to make sure that they see how what they're doing here is going to feed into their career preparation going forward, as Jordan did for many years when he was looking after the Little 5 races. So that's really a big part of the tradition that's behind the scenes, is that this is one of the greatest leadership laboratories in the world, bar none. If I could go back to Kelly and do this right there inside the school, I would find a way. But this is great work.
Well, it should be a great day for racing. We appreciate you coming up to spend a few minutes with us. But last year's race was a very fun one. Black Key Bulls came away with the win. Let's go recap how that went down.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The pomp and circumstance was back at Bill Armstrong Stadium for the 67th running of the men's Little 500. The teams ready to go in this race. It would be Sigma Alpha Epsilon leading the field down the front stretch as the pole sitter. But the early story in this contest would be the wind and the crashes that it caused. Big pile up here early on the first lap in turn 3. On the third lap, we'd have even more crashing going on in turn 1, taking out several teams at the back of the pack. Later in the race, lap 170, the pole sitter SAE gets taken out. They pick it back up again and get underway. But when we go back to green, the story would be the Black Key Bulls, as they open up a sizable lead on the field and never look back. They pick up their second win in team history. Second place in this race goes to Gray Goat Cycling, and third place goes to the Cutters.
And Black Key Bulls looking to defend their title from last year. They lifted that Borg Warner trophy. Just a really good day for Black Key Bulls.
Absolutely. Last year they capitalized on a mistake from the SAEs, and Xavier Martinez got on the bike about 30 laps left to go and never looked back. It was an all-independent team finish. I think we'll have a lot of those podium guys back, in addition to some others in the mix, and again, a wide-open field for this year.
And Black Key Bulls, we talked to them. They aren't necessarily looking to repeat. They just want to win this race again.
Here comes Black Key Bulls and Kevin Mangle. They are your 2017 Little 500 champions.
That was Black Key Bulls 1 year ago, hoisting a bicycle as the winning team. Now in 2018, they realize they are the defending champions, but the mentality isn't changing.
Instead of focusing on trying to repeat, we're just trying to focus on winning again, because if you look at people who say they want to repeat, there's a lot of added pressure on that that comes with that. But if we just focus on trying to win again, the only difference is we're in a special color jersey.
However, there is one small similarity from last year.
I think it's just kind of funny, ironic, because we were 8th last year in quals and we're 8th again this year. So we'll see if that's a lucky charm, I guess.
Black Key Bulls has to be looked at as one of the favorites again. They are returning 3 of their 4 riders from last year.
Last year, we had similar depth, and that helped us when we attacked, because we could put 4 people out there and not worry about someone being significantly less strong than someone else. So having 4 people that are very similar in strength definitely gives us a big opportunity on race day.
Being in the race is very different than just being out in practice. And so having 3 guys returning with that experience, with that knowledge of how the race kind of flows, is really important.
And for more on Black Key Bulls, we send down to Eddie Cotton, who's with Ryan Knapp.
Thanks, guys. I'm here with Coach Ryan Knapp. Now, not only are you the coach of Black Key Bulls, but you're the coach of Theta Cycling, and yesterday you guys pulled out the win. Can you just tell me a little bit about that unique race yesterday?
Yeah, it was a slow one, honestly, and a little bit almost boring for a while because everyone was just kind of in a Mexican standoff, just not really doing anything. And so we just had to kind of be content to sit around for a while. And so, yeah, we just hung out and kind of bided our time. And then, luckily Rachel Brown is a superstar, and the girls set her up well, and she was able to, seal the deal late.
Now, heading into this race, you're the defending champions. What are you telling your team, and what did you learn from last year?
Last year was a little bit unique in the way it ended up playing out. Teams don't get away solo all that often. And so it's just really a matter of taking what the bike race gives you. You can't, unless you have a very rare, super strong team of 4 that can just dominate from start to finish. It's kind of every year's strategy is going to vary a little bit. But yeah, we're just going to see see how the other teams want to play their cards today. We have a rough idea of how we want to play ours, but obviously it's got to interface with everything else. So we'll see.
Now, something that's been talked about a lot is about how terrible qual's weather was, and a lot of teams that are pretty talented are going to try and get aggressive early. How do you think your team is going to approach that?
Yeah, we didn't have a very good day at quals. A lot of that was probably weather related. Quals doesn't mean too terribly much. It's obviously nice to qual in the front row and have a low stress start to the bike race, but it's normally not a deal breaker if you're not in that area. But yeah, I would expect the front row teams to hit the gas pretty early and just see, to make it safe, and also to kind of potentially put pressure on those teams that may not have qualied very well. So we'll see, but I think it'll be a pretty classic start to the bike race. Everybody up front will, they have plenty of strong guys, so they'll go hard. But we're not too far out of that front bubble. We'll get up there and participate too. So.
And lastly, Theta won last year, BKB won last year, Theta won this year. If BKB wins today, what are we calling it?
I don't know. We're just trying to get a top 10 today.
Fair enough. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for that. Ryan Knapp, a great coach in this race. I want to welcome in another great guest. Sam Beiseisen is here with us. Sam, welcome back to Bloomington.
I am so excited to be here, Josh, especially with you and Jordan.
And Sam, you've been around this race a long time. You are an Indiana native, like me. We both grew up in the region, and like me, you are a big Indianapolis 500 fan. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to come to Indiana University and just discover what it is that the Little 500 is as a racing fan from Indiana.
Right. I knew nothing about the Little 500 when I was a student here, my first year coming in. But I worked on the IDS, as most of us, I think, that are involved in broadcast or anything like that.
I did as well. There you go.
Exactly. And I remember Robbie Howard, another region guy, saying, hey, you should check out this Little 500 thing because you love the Indianapolis 500. And I said, yeah, well, it's not the same. It's bicycles. How cool could it be? And all it took was, I think, one open practice to be like, this is the craziest thing you could ever see. This is Indiana University. This is what sports are.
For sure.
You fall in love with it really quickly, and that's why you keep coming back even after you graduate, like you do and like I have.
Yeah, it just draws people back. People love it. I myself, I remember I had committed to IU, and not that I was an athlete, not that I was a basketball player. I had planned on coming to IU, rather, I should say, and I had never actually visited the campus. And so I came down my senior year in April, and having grown up in Indiana, I can remember as a little kid at my cousin's house, we watched Breaking Away on Betamax. And so I knew it existed, and I did a little bit of bike racing in high school, and I just remember, and again, like I said before, my family had gone to the Indianapolis very regularly when we were kids, and sitting in the stands watching the 2007 Little 500 for the very first time, it was just this magic of, wow, they've combined the Indianapolis 500 with the bike race on the campus of Indiana University, and it's woven into the history and tradition and fabric of IU.
Right. I mean, you talk about the Indianapolis 500. I've been going since I was, I think, 12 months old, 13 months old, maybe.
Man.
So the part that I fell in love with that wasn't necessarily the racing. It was the people you see every year, the pageantry behind it, just the feeling you get when you walk into that track. And everything comes to life the same way when you walk into Bill Armstrong Stadium. And you see all these students, all these athletes that have worked year-round for this one chance to do something special. And it's just, there's nothing like it. You don't get that in really any other single-day sporting event, at least at this amateur level.
So today's race, a lot of parity, What are you most looking forward to?
I'm most looking forward to seeing who outthinks the other. I mean, you just had Knapp on talking about just his strategy the last 3 races. He's figured something out. Well, everybody else thinks they can be as smart as Knapp today. So they're all going to try to outsmart him, try to be the smartest person in the room. I think we're going to see some teams that want to spread things out and make it a 2 or 3 horse race like you always do. But you might end up getting a 9 or 10 team field like we seem to have gotten the last few years, where it's just, okay, who's going to sprint, who's going to run away from this big pack. Maybe you get a wreck like we did 4 years ago when BKB won the first time. I think there's just going to be so many mixed strategies that are going to be thrown out there, and it's who's going to be that Pod Piper, who's going to be the guy that everybody follows, because they're the ones that tend to win these races.
And interestingly, this year we do have a couple of top-tier teams where I think that in the past it might have been only 1 or 2 where people were really focused and engaged on them, whereas this year Sig Ep has come out and had a great year of training, and they come in with great fitness, and they're going to be one of the horses that teams key off of. Similarly, in yellow jersey, you can't deny that. You're always going to be gunning for yellow, and a couple others in our top rows that it will be a lot of parity. I think that people will mix it up a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if we had something like the women's race yesterday, 11 teams in the lead lap at the end of the race. Little 500, I've been around it long enough that if you look at it, for whatever reason, it has a weird way of trying to do the exact opposite of what it did the year prior. So last year we had a breakaway with BKB winning off the front. I'm just feeling it. I'm feeling it today. It'll be some sort of a sprint finish, so excited to watch it unfold.
I think that's what people want to see, right?
Yep.
Those are the more exciting races. Those are the ones that pack this place.
Well, Sam, we really appreciate it. We're just about to get set for the invocation and all the pomp and circumstance, but welcome back. Enjoy the race day. It's a great day for it.
Yeah, I can't wait. My favorite thing is going to be not just watching this race, but watching you guys' call.
Oh, thank you so much.
When I get home later today.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sam, for joining us. Really appreciate it. But Jordan, as we kind of look at this race right now, I mean, we're kind of waiting for all the pomp and circumstance, but that's what this is, a lot of pomp and circumstance.
And again, going back to the story of the Indianapolis 500, this race started in 1951 by Howdy Wilcox. His dad was the driver, the winner of the Indianapolis 500 in 1919. The pre-race pageantry, everything that we do down here in Bloomington mimics it and is very closely aligned with what happens up in Indianapolis.
Let's send it down now for the invocation.
For a moment of silence. Let us pause for a moment of silence in honor of the late Neil Kelty. Glenn Banks, Steering Committee 1950 and IU Foundation Board Member 1978 to 2009. Jim Pulaski, Steering Committee 1953 and Board of Associates member. Reed Schwand, a member of the 1998 Steering Committee. And Dan King Thomason, President of the 1956 Steering Committee. Eternal and loving Father, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to gather together for this competition. We ask for your continued blessings of good weather today. We thank you for the blessings of these riders with their athleticism, discipline, and determination, all of which are gifts that come from you. We thank you for the hard work that has gone into planning and preparing for this event. Lord God Almighty, who have created all humanity to strive for excellence, we ask you to send your blessings upon these teams. May they compete in a spirit of fulfillment, joy, and respect. Please keep them safe from all injury and any other harms. Lord God, our elation gives you glory. Our genuine happiness pleases you. May we celebrate responsibly and with kindness. Bless us here who cheer for our beloved athletes and those with us in spirit. And may we come to know you better through the experience of this happy day. We ask all this in your most holy name. Amen.
Presenting your colors today, the Pershing Rifles Color Guard of Indiana University's Army ROTC program. I use Pershing Rifles as a competitive drill and honor squad which consistently receives high marks in national competition. Look skyward for parachutists from Skydive Indianapolis carrying the American flag and the state of Indiana flag into Armstrong Stadium. Please join our riders and coaches in celebrating America's freedom, those who now protect it, and to honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, we introduce from the Jacobs School of Music, its choral student ensemble, the Singing Hoosiers. Please remove your caps and stand as the Singing Hoosiers present our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land, o'er the land, o'er the land of the free, and the home of the brave?
As the starting riders come to the start-finish line and we get ready for racing, we present Indiana University's men's a cappella group, Another Round, with Back Home Again in Indiana.
Do, do, do. Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still shining bright through the sycamores for me. The new mown hay sends all its fragrance from the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still shining bright through the sycamores for me. The new mown hay sends all its fragrance from the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the Wabash, how I long for my Indiana home.
And there it is, back home again in Indiana as the balloons go up into the air. Just a great spectacle, but now we're gonna send it back down to the field to Eddie Cotton.
Thanks very much, Josh. Now, prior to this race, we talked a lot about how those quals were going to impact this race. And you look at a few individual teams like Beta, who qualified 21st, 3PH, who qualified 20th, and Bears, who qualified 16th, who are all going to be very aggressive. I talked to Beta specifically, and they finished 4th last year, so they're very confident, and they said they only train to ride at the front. So that's something to look for with 3 top 25 riders, and they're battle tested. They actually told me one of their riders dealt with 102-degree fever during team pursuit, and they just did quite fine in that. In addition, I talked to Hank Duncan of Forest, and he has a pretty good knowledge of the fields, and he told me these first 3 laps are going to be chaos with all these teams trying to get to the front, and he expects 3PH, Bears, and Beta to all be towards the front within the first 3 laps. Back to you guys.
And now here is our Grand Marshal, Tyra Buss.
Ride smart, keep your head up, good luck, and Godspeed. Now, the words we've all been waiting to hear. Gentlemen, mount your little 500 bicycles.
And there we go, the words said by Tyra Buss, a graduating senior for the IU women's basketball team. And now we are just about to start our pace laps here. And as a rider, what's going through the rider's mind as we see Chappie Blackwell about to release these riders behind the pace car?
Josh, I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter how many times I hear it. Back home again in Indiana, standing next to your bike like that, I shed a tear. It makes you emotional, it makes you sad, it makes you happy to be back on this in Bill Armstrong Stadium for Little 500 today. The riders, they're rearing and ready to go. They will be instructed to kind of hold that formation of the grid, our 33 teams from 1st through 33rd.
So now let's take a look at those teams. Cutters, Kappa Sigma, and SAE in that first row. Cutters, the pole team this year.
Starting it off for Cutters is going to be Eric Schwedlin, the senior from Indianapolis, Indiana. He has 2 years of experience in this bike race, and so he will be the one to lead it across the start-finish line at the green flag.
And in row 2, SIGEP, who we talked about in the open. Pi Lambda Phi, a bit of a surprising team, and the Fijis, they'll be wearing those candy-striped jerseys in this year's race.
Switching down to row number 3, we have Sigma Chi, the defending champion Black Key Bulls, and Forest Cycling rounding out our top 9.
Forest Cycling, a bit of an underdog team. Black Key Bulls, obviously the defending champions. In the 4th row, a new team to the race. Chi Alpha is a Christian youth group here on campus. They are in the 10th spot. Delta Chi and Phi Kappa Psi back in the race this year.
Moving down to row number 5, we have AE Pi, Grey Goat, our second place runner-up from the 2017 race, and Phi Delta Theta in the silver jersey.
A lot of history there with Phi Delta Theta. Grey Goat, another team to watch, especially with Sam Stratton this year. In row 6, it's Bears, Alpha Sigma Phi, and Pi Kappa Alpha. But Bears, an interesting team to watch. A lot of experience coming back as we move to row 7.
Indeed, young pioneers. Starting it off for row number 7, then 3PH Cycling and Beta Theta Pi. As Eddie had mentioned just in his interview a couple of moments ago, I would look to see row 7 move out and move up very quick at the start of this bike race.
And moving along to row 8, Lambda Chi Alpha, all rookies. Alpha Kappa Lambda in their first race, and Black Ice Cycling, just a bunch of D3 hockey players that wanted to come out and bike.
That's ice skates to cinders.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there in row 8 as we move farther back. CSF Cycling, Evans Scholars, and Acacia. Obviously, Acacia with those ghost exchanges. I'm sure we'll see those along the backstretch here today. And moving into row 10, Delta Sigma Phi, the first year in the race for them. Delta Upsilon and Jet Black. Jet Black, a very interesting team moving into this race.
And rounding out row number 11, Beta Sigma Psi, Phi Sigma Kappa, and Theta Chi.
So we are just going through our pace laps here.
Chappie Blackwell at our start-finish line. He is holding up number 1. 1 lap to go until we go green flag racing here at Bill Armstrong Stadium.
We were down there on the track earlier, but what are these track conditions looking like right now?
Honestly, from up here, there's a little bit of cloud cover. It looks very compact and fast. I expect a fast race today. If we look over into turn number 3, where the pace car is going to exit, we see the flagpole, and it's blowing a little bit, the wind is, but I think for the most part, it'll be a fast race with these track conditions.
The pace car speeding up a little bit more. These 11 rows of 3 holding their spots. And we are getting ever closer to that green flag. It'll be interesting to see how these teams slot in there, how the teams from the back move up.
And lucky for us, I mean, quals, like I said before, I mean, there were a couple that are farther back, but the good teams are towards the front, and I think that they will play it pretty safe as we get the green flag. The pace car now pulled off. It is up to Eric Schwedland of Cutters to hold on to that pace as we round turn 3 into turn 4, and here we go.
So here they come around turn 4. Chappie Blackwell still with that yellow flag. Chappie Blackwell has that green flag in his right hand. Let's go racing at the 2018 Little 500, and already Joe Krahulik putting it into high gear.
SAE out very quickly to the front, coming out of turn 2. Cutter slots in right behind him, and behind him, Kappa Sigma.
It's going to be interesting to see how these riders slot in early as they come around turn 3. This is where the first crash happened last year.
And you can see already, again, it was strung out there, and now that Kappa Sig takes over, it's going to bunch up a little. But if you get back to the 20, there's already a little bit of a break coming. So we've got teams off the back, and this, I think, will lead to a safe race. Not a lot of people to get into the mix to cause accidents early.
And now it's Grey Goat taking their turn out in front. That should be Sam Stratton on the bike.
And behind his wheel, you can see that Beta Theta Pi rider already making it all the way up to the front from row 7.
Along with Bears is right in there too. Those were the 3 teams that we expected to make moves early on in this race, and they are already up there.
And Josh, something that we did not talk about at the Open, however, we've got 2 teams with pre-race penalties. We have SAE, who's one of our favorites. They will have to serve 2 seconds in addition to Lambda Chi Alpha, and they will have to do that before lap 20 of the opening for their pre-race penalty. So we'll look for that team in a little bit of a teal color, I think, to come to our start-finish line to serve that penalty.
And now Phi-Sci taking their turn out in the front, the first year back in the race for the Phi-Sci, celebrating their 50th anniversary of their 1968 win. So it's good to see them back in the race. A whole lot of alumni coming back for them as well.
Yeah, up until Phi-Sci was recently kicked off, I cannot remember the year, but they had qualified for every single Little 500 in its history. And so, you know, of course, it's a little bit of the environment of the university, and you're going to have a couple of rotten apples in the house. And so it's good to see them back where they belong in Little 500.
So a whole lot of teams just taking turns at the front right now. Is that kind of what we should expect early on?
I think so, and the bike race is pretty fast, so they're clicking off 36, 37-second laps. And again, the top looks like 6 teams are all single file, taking their turn at the front and keeping it a pretty aggressive bike race.
And this is pretty much perfect weather for this bike race. A little bit of wind flapping on that American flag over there in turn 3. But right now, with great conditions, a little bit more cloud cover. Talking with Joe Krahulik earlier before the race, he was saying how he would maybe like a little bit more cloud cover, and it looks like that's what we have.
And the nice thing about the clouds is that when, you know, of course you want sun for the fans and have a good day, but the cloud cover keeps the track moist. It keeps it compact and it doesn't dry out and get loose, which is where we're going to see accidents on a typical day. So having it cloud cover is going to be keeping it a safe, fast bike race. Oh, And there's a rub of a wheel
there
already.
We already have somebody down.
And that looks like Forrest Cycling. They rubbed the wheel, but we're going to continue to be green. He gets right back up. And that's just the nerves a little bit of the nerves.
So that was Forrest that did go down. Now he is about, Parker Rauschuber was there as we are going to take a look at this replay. But he did a good job just going down and getting straight back up.
Yeah, and I don't think that his coaches, when he gets back to the pit, he was not in a great position towards the back of the field. And luckily it was just a one-rider wreck to get it out of the way quick. But I suspect he'll be able to put it in a couple of laps and make it back to the front of this bike race to the peloton.
Forrest, one of those teams, and talking with them coming up to this race, they were kind of the underdogs. That's how they see themselves. And now it looks like they're setting up for an exchange here in turn 1 as the rest of the pack coming around turn 2.
And he just, that rider can't beat himself up over it. That crashes happen. He just has to trust in his team and trust in their fitness to be able to get back into the bike race. It's only a straightaway down, and it's early. If it were me, I would much rather crash in the first 50 laps rather than the last 50 laps, because that's when the fireworks are happening. That's when everybody's contending for the win.
It's such a long bike race, basically a marathon here. 200 laps, just over 50 miles. So we'll see plenty of exchanges today. Teams trying to get back into the race as Forrest burning it down the front stretch. They're trying to catch up to the pack that's coming around turn 2 and that back stretch. So you mentioned those penalties early in talking with SAE. They are on a prime spot to serve their penalty right next to that penalty box.
Yeah, so our penalty box is located just past the start-finish line, and their pit is the one adjacent to that. So really, if you're going to get a penalty, which it's obviously not ideal, but for them, all they have to do, come into the penalty box, serve it, and then I think that their strategy will be to just run the bike and do more or less kind of a long exchange. So it'll be interesting to see how the pack responds to it, but I suspect, given their fitness, they'll be able to serve the penalty and get back pretty quick.
So we'll see when SAE wants to serve that penalty. There is somebody in their pit right now waiting with the bike. They're talking with their coach. As some other teams go through some exchanges here on the front stretch.
Sigma Phi Epsilon, our Spring Series winner, on the front, driving it in white.
That is Bears right behind them. So they've already made a move to get up there pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And, again, quals aren't great. Quals day wasn't perfect, but very quickly, within less than 10 laps, the fit teams are at the front of the race, and the not-so-fit teams are going to be at the back.
And that's pretty much how we expected things early on, as Forrest says they're coming around turn 3, setting up for another exchange. So some very quick exchanges for the one team that went down in that one-team wreck in turn 4. And now we're going to send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more.
Thanks, Josh. Now, as we highlight various teams throughout this broadcast, one team that I think doesn't get highlighted enough is Kappa Sig. They actually qualified second, which is their second highest qualifications ever. The only time they did better than that, they held the pole and won the race back in the 70s. And we talked to them before the race about how important that qualification was to them. Because obviously we know qualifications does not mean everything, but what it does is it gives you an opportunity to pick your pit. And for Kappa Sig, it was huge for them to get that second pit spot right behind Cutters. And they mentioned how being an experienced team, they know it's always important to be next to those other highly competitive teams. So they're right next to Cutters, pole first, and they're going to be right nearby Black Key Bulls, so they could look at their strategies and adjust based on that. In addition, Jack Bosler talked to me about how important it is that they have those 3 returning riders, and their one rider who has never rid in Little 500 before, he's actually a BMX national champion. So they got plenty of skill on this team, so I'd watch out for them for the rest of the race. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you very much, Eddie, at Kappa Sig in that second spot. We also want to remind you, the Little 500 brought to you by Subaru of America and Royal on the east side. So we did see SAE take that penalty, very quick penalty, and they're right back in it.
And I think it was Sean Marks that actually started the race for them, and they left it to our ITT champion this year, Joe Krahulik, to do the brunt of the work. And honestly, it looked more or less like a slow exchange for them. So they are right back in the thick of this and in the middle of the pack contending for the race still.
And the guests just keep on coming. We want to now welcome in the Grand Marshal of this weekend. It's Tyra Buss. Tyra, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is awesome. What a view you guys got up here.
I know, we can see everything up here. But just coming back, I mean, what does it mean to be Grand Marshal?
It means a lot. You know, whenever I was asked, I was really excited. And then actually being here, you know, this is actually the first Little 500 that I've gotten to experience. Usually we have spring workouts, you know, after season. So normally I wasn't allowed to, you know, come and experience this. So I'm really excited to be here. And, you know, it's just a great atmosphere and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's got to be a thrill going up there in front of all these people and saying those words that everybody wants to hear.
It's a little bit different, you know, actually. Everyone just staring at me, so I was a little nervous at first. But, you know, I got a little test run yesterday during the women's race. So, yeah, it's definitely, you know, really exciting. I'm just really happy to be here.
Tyra, I always tell people that when they come to Indiana University, they usually have a notion of two things: basketball and bicycles. And, you know, they might not have ever stepped foot on campus, but they come in and they know, you know, there's Assembly Hall and all the history and tradition behind that, and then Bill Armstrong Stadium, this crazy bike race that happens in the middle of April. You yourself, talented, set great records at the Assembly Hall for the women's basketball team and just came off a WNIT victory. Tell us what that experience was like.
You know, it was a great experience, and to be able to, you know, say that I ended my college career on a win, you know, it couldn't have been any better. So it was definitely bittersweet, you know, just winning a championship, and, you know, that's what I came here to do. You know, I wanted to come and make an impact on this program, and to be able to say, you know, that I'm an NIT champion, it's definitely pretty special. And so I'm just really excited for the future of Indiana women's basketball, and I think, you know, a lot of people are going to be watching them now.
Did anything surprise you about kind of what this whole spectacle is, being your first time here?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they're really fast, and you know, it kind of scares me a little bit because they're so close together. I'm like, how do they not, you know, hit each other? So it's really cool, you know, how, you know, they kind of do the strategic, you know, side of it. It's really cool to see, you know, the fast exchanges and things like that. So it's definitely really exciting, and I'm just happy to, you know, be able to experience this and to watch them.
Do you have any experience on a bike yourself?
Yes, but not like this. Not this type of bike riding. I can ride, you know, just nice and slow and at my own pace. But like this is, you know, it's competitive and it's just really fun to watch.
Favorite part of the weekend so far?
Definitely this, for sure. And I'm not just saying that. This is for real. I'm definitely the Little 500 race. It's been really exciting, both the women's and the men's.
It's kind of a good way to kind of end your Bloomington experience, I guess, in a way.
Absolutely.
It's a very fun day of racing here as looks like Kappa Sigma potentially setting up for an exchange here on the front stretch. What do you think of these guys just hopping on and off bikes? I mean,
it's crazy. I mean, it's so cool to see. I can't even, you know, imagine, you know, being out there and, you know, I'm a competitor, but this is a different type of, you know, competitive level. And so it's really cool to, you know, watch them, and they're just out there having fun and just racing. So it's really cool to see.
Any interest in appealing Student Foundation and going and getting grad degree and maybe participating next year?
I don't know about that. I'm not sure.
But you are headed over and potentially going to play professional ball?
Yep, absolutely. Trying to, you know, make a training camp at the WNBA, and then I'll definitely, you know, play overseas, whether that's in the fall or spring. You know, I still got a semester of student teaching to get done since we're not allowed to do that during season. So yeah, I'm definitely, you know, I'm undecided right now, but I'll be playing basketball for sure.
Oh, and we have another wreck out of turn one off of the exchange. It looked like Phi Gamma Delta and Pi Lambda go down. I think we'll get a replay on it, but I think that the two just were doing the exchanges and they bumped each other, causing a wreck to go down. Just the two teams involved and still no yellow flag out.
So it looks like we're still on green flag racing, but Tyra, we want to thank you for coming up here and spending a few minutes with us. We are wishing you luck. We're definitely rooting for you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you very much. So it will be interesting to see what happens on the edge of that kind of small wreck there in the pits on the front stretch. Those are two teams that are pretty high contenders trying to make a name for themselves in this race.
For sure. Fiji has a lot of history and tradition in the race. They have 5 wins all time. Looks like the bike probably was broken because he brought it in so quickly. And Pi Lambda, we talked a little bit about them at the Open. They had a great quals day, and so they are finding themselves chasing very quickly.
So the main group coming around turn 3 and now into turn 4. And Pi Lambda Phi not too far behind them, so they have done actually a solid job of keeping up.
I do think that the Fijis had some sort of mechanical issue on that wreck, which led them to get a little bit farther back than where the Pi Lambdas are. As we look back at the action, the defending champ Black Key Bulls looks like they're due up for an exchange coming out of turn number 3.
Looks like Kevin Mangle getting ready to get put on the bike now. So SAE makes, or excuse me, that is Black Key Bulls that makes that exchange. And they just slot right back in to the main group coming around turn 1 as Pi Lambda Phi also makes an exchange. So a lot of just switching off here early, it looks like, to keep riders fresh.
Yeah, sure. In the beginning of the bike race, you can't win in the first 50 laps, but you can certainly lose it. You just want to ride safe and take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. But like I said, you're not going to kind of launch an attack off the front and expect to get away because everybody's fresh. Nobody's ridden any laps yet, and just trying to keep calm and be able to get through this first set for all these teams.
And one of those top riders on one of the top teams is Joe Krahulik on SAE. He's now joined by his brother this year. Mary Kate Hamilton has more.
Joe has just taken off his training wheels. Let's watch and see how he does. Good job, Joe.
Joe Krahulik was 4 years old when he learned how to ride a bike. He was a junior in high school when he taught himself how to train on rollers after seeing his older brother Andy compete in his first Little 500.
Front stretch here, just so everybody knows.
He has him outside on the patio and he's training well. He's riding rollers with music and it's not like struggling, he's working out.
It was like 90 minutes on concrete when he's never been on rollers before.
The decision had been made that Saturday.
Joe came to IU freshman year and joined Andy on the Sigma Alpha Epsilon bike team. They were on the same team for 2 years, placing 2nd and 4th in the Little 500 and motivating each other every step of the way.
He just pushed me harder than I would have pushed myself if he wasn't next to me.
This year, the youngest Krahulik brother, Rob, followed in Andy and Joe's footsteps.
I watched Andy do Little 5 and it made me want to do it the whole time. Joe did it, so it just kind of assured it.
For the Krahuliks, biking runs in the family. Father Dave Krahulik competed in the Little 500 all 4 years for Sigma Nu. But Dave and his wife Karen could have never predicted the role the Little 500 would play in their sons' lives.
I thought if he had his way, they would be Little 5 riders. But who knew that they all 3 would do it, and for the same team.
In Joe's senior year, the joy he takes away from his Little 500 experience goes far beyond competition.
I've brought more people into it, and that was like a huge thing for me last year, just the satisfaction of bringing guys into it, integrating them into the team. I obviously want to win one, but you know, that's on the surface, and I think I've got a lot more beneath that.
As for freshman Rob, he hopes to continue the legacy his brothers set before him.
I want to be a dynasty. I want to stay competitive. I want us to be one of the top 5 teams every single year, that they think of this house and they associate it with the bike team being good.
Sigma Alpha Epsilon placed 3rd at qualifications this year and hope to be in contention for the trophy. For IU Sports Media, I'm Mary Kate Hamilton.
Talk about an incredible story. These Krahulik brothers are truly building a legacy here with SAE, and I actually talked to the oldest of the family, Andrew Krahulik, prior to the race about what advice you give to both of these brothers, because this is the first time you have to provide advice for both brothers. And he told me, for Rob, it's real simple. Eat laps, stay focused, and get Joe where he needs to be to win us this race. Don't let veterans bully you, and when you're in the pack, act like you're 6'4", and when you're at the front of the race, act like you're 5'4". His advice for his brother Joe, just wait for your team to get you in place and win this thing in that final sprint. And that's what you got to say to the guy who's number 1 in ITTs and the fastest in the field. In addition, he mentioned how his 2016 team really set the groundwork for what this team is ready to do as they are trying to do something really special with SAE. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And we want to remind you that the Little 500 is presented by Subaru of America and Royal Subaru on the east side. But SAE, just an absolute powerhouse this year. Both of those Krahulik brothers, like Eddie was talking about, two of some of the better riders in this field.
For sure, and it's very neat to see the family connection of all of those guys being recruited to go to SAE and being brothers within the fraternity and brothers in real life. And just another note, their dad was actually a Little 500 rider himself, and to provide a little bit more of a connection back to this bike race, he rode for Sigma Nu in the 1980s, and those guys obviously didn't ride competitive bikes in high school. They were all standout swimmers in the Indianapolis area, but came here, didn't want to do that at the collegiate level and have this connection to the Little 500 that they have built something pretty special over the last several years.
Joe Krahulik, the top rider in ITTs this year. His brother Rob, 23rd in ITTs. I mean, two top 25 riders with just those two. But then you got Sean Marks, who got his first race experience last year in 13th. Ryan Tufnell in 65th as well. This team potentially could be there come lap 195, come lap 200.
They have been close every single year for the last couple of years, and they've just been knocking on that door. And in Joe's last race, he's going to leave it all out on the track today. And we were out down there in the pit earlier before the race started, talking with their coach and talking with some of the riders. And just like Eddie had mentioned, their job is to get him to lap 200 as fresh as possible. And if Joe gets there, he's our ITT champion. He can ride people off of his wheel and is a smart sprinter when it comes down to a sprint finish.
And we have already seen SAE take that 2-second penalty. It went right into an exchange, and they basically filtered right back into the field. As they're up towards the top right now.
Sigma Chi coming out.
Looks like they could be setting up for an exchange coming off the front around turn 1.
And so interestingly, Sig Chi is pitted right at the end of the backstretch into turn number 3. So they're that last pit on the backstretch and have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that most of your higher qualifying teams are going to be along the front stretch. And so they have the advantage of being able to not be marked by some of our bigger teams and see it right there. He filters right back in, and that was a beautiful exchange to get him back to the front of the peloton.
Yeah, Sigma Chi with all 4 of their riders in the top 50 of ITTs, a very strong team. They finished 7th last year, qualified 6th, and they have one Little 500 victory that came back in 1994. So definitely a team to watch as they're right up there, but looks like the pack's still pretty big right now.
For sure. And, it was pretty quick and strung out to start the bike race. And right now you can look at them on the backstretch, and it is very, very wide. And when it's wide, that means it's going to be a little bit slower and people aren't necessarily doing their work. But that's to be expected. I think that there's a lot of peaks and valleys and lulls and speeding up in terms of the 200 laps that we'll see over the course of today.
We are through 32 lap score, now 33 lap score as they cross the start-finish line right in front of our vantage point.
Phi-Sci driving it on the front. And again, first year back for them in several years, and they are riding like they're veterans, even though this is everybody's first experience into Little 500 today.
3 sophomores and a junior on that Phi Kappa Psi team. They're just happy to be back in the race, happy to be back in the pomp and circumstance that is the Little 500. And they're looking to potentially make some moves here today, as we've seen them up towards the top, and they're right in the middle of the pack right now.
Right now at the front of the bike race, that's Tom Settle. He's a junior out of Carmel, Indiana. He was fourth overall at both ITTs and 4th overall at Missing Out. As we mentioned in the Open, Sigma Phi Epsilon, they were our team pursuit champion, and they, again, similarly have built themselves a little bit of a program where they had a core group of guys, and they slowly but steadily have risen, being able to win in 2015 and are knocking every single year since then.
And not on the screen, but Forest Cycling looked like they had an issue with the bike. So they had to have somebody run it to them over in turn 1. And now they're about half a lap behind the rest of the pack right now. So they've just had issue after issue so far in this race.
And that's tough. Again, we said you have this singular focus on this one race that happens in a year, and you're putting all of your time and energy into training and making sure that everything is as perfect as it can be. And to have it come down to a wreck or a mechanical or something that's out of your control, that's just it's really frustrating for those guys. So hopefully that they can get back into it. They're still only about a half a straightaway down. As we see the pack coming out of turn number 1, really impressed with our beta team. They're a half a straightaway up on that exchange. So again, they have the talent, they have the fitness, didn't quite have the qual, but they are riding like veterans and riding where they're supposed to be.
That is Jonathan Jaggard on the bike right now for Beta Theta Pi, their top ITT rider.
I was talking to JJ in the pit earlier, and he said something similar. You know, that I really just think it's going to be a sprint sort of a finish, because his goal was to get his teammate to the end of the bike race as fresh as could be. They're hoping to put Jack McNamara, the senior, also president of Riders Council, onto the race at the end. BKB comes in for an exchange, and now it looks like SIGEP is countering that a little, and they will be due to exchange riders next time around.
As Noah Voiles now on the bike, the team captain, a senior for Black Key Bulls, on the team last year. And in talking with them, we kind of mentioned it in the pre-race show, but they're not really looking to repeat rather than just win again. That's their mindset coming into this year's race.
And that's a good mindset to take. You have to take every race. You have 3 returning riders, but Little 500 is such a hard race to win that you want to treat each year individually. And you just because you did the work last year doesn't mean that you can't do the work this year to be successful. So having that fresh mentality is going to set them up for success today.
And Forrest is coming in for another exchange here on the front stretch. They've had a tough go of it, but they do have 3 new riders this year in the race. Let's go find out more about Forrest Cycling.
The names Black Key Bulls, Cutters, SAE, and Beta might ring a bell. Year in and year out, they are towards the top of the Little 500. But for Forrest Cycling, they have been right up there in years past. They like flying under the radar.
One advantage that we have is that we're under the radar. We're not one of those popular teams that everybody follows. So come race time, you never know with us.
That's what we try for every year, really. There's been a lot of times in the past where we'll be up front and the announcers won't really say anything about us, so it's kind of cool. Like, it's just something that we have on our side.
Heading into this year's race, Forrest thrives with the unknown. They aren't quite sure where they lie in the grand scheme of things, but want to sneak up on some teams.
Not many teams really know how we're going to fare. We don't know how we're going to fare, but we embrace that kind of that chip on the shoulder team, and we really want to. We have that mentality and we embrace it coming into the race.
Forrest is embracing the underdog mentality coming into 2018 after an 11th place finish last season. But now they only have 1 returning rider, but still they're looking to improve on last year.
I think it's just kind of building off of kind of the hype that we built for ourselves last year and keep going upward.
The last couple of years, I mean, you have riders like Joe Hunt, Colin Evans, Samuel Patterson who have ridden 3-4 years. And now, this year combined, we have 1 year of race experience. It's kind of crazy, that big turnover.
Even though experience may not be on their side this year, the 1 returning racer is trying to spread his knowledge.
Showing them the ropes, really, and just getting them excited about it, because that's the biggest thing, is you have to put a lot of time and commitment into this, so it has to be fun, it has to be something you enjoy. So we try to just get everyone on the same page and have fun doing it.
Forrest is the last dormitory team left on the men's side. They practice in a basement and don't get much funding. Yet, they are embracing what they have.
We embrace that kind of Joe Schmo, chip on the shoulder team. And I mean, you see, it's not a great facility we have here, but it's a basement, it's a place to train. We bring our TV in, watch races, listen to music. And in the end, it's not about how much funding you have, it's about how much you train. And that's what determines the winner.
And Forrest, really an underdog story, and they're going to really have to embrace that mentality here in the race. As we saw earlier, a chain actually fell off of their bike, and they had to replace that bike. We saw Hank Duncan making that exchange just a few laps ago. And I talked to the mechanic for Forrest and a few of their guys, and they mentioned that we are a great group of guys. We believe in ourselves, and this is still our year. So they're looking to get back to that lead pack and fight back with that underdog mentality. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Good info there on Forrest as we are through 43 laps scored now.
And just one comment on Forrest, and you know they're working hard and they're trying to get back into it. But during that promo, we could see in the picture by picture they were still off the back and they're about a straightaway down. And it seems to me that they've been doing 2-lap exchanges, so that's quick. It's really difficult in the sense that you're losing ground every single time you're doing that exchange. And with the chain, you're kind of bound to one bike. So that rider needs to be able to just put in a power effort and just slowly but surely crawl your way back as the pack slows down to get back into it.
It's Forrest about half of a straightaway behind the pack right now as they try to catch up.
And that's Jonathan Steenport, their senior. So he's the one from Fort Wayne, Indiana that has 1 year of experience in this race. And he's been there before, and it looks like he'll make it.
The only one with race experience on that Forrest team.
And as the pack is coming out of turn number 4.
It's like Jet Black burning for an exchange.
And Chi Alpha, our new team, is at the front of the race behind them Black Key Bulls. So again, Chi Alpha, their first year in it, and they're throwing some punches. They say, hey, we belong here. Here we are.
And it looks like there's a little bit of dust around turn 1. How does that potentially impact these riders?
Honestly, before the start of the race, from our vantage point up here on top of the press box, I thought that the track looked really good and it looked compact. But with dust coming up in the first in the beginning 50 laps in the opening, that'll deteriorate throughout the day, and it could cause some concern for crashes or for safety issues. So hopefully it stays together, but riders will have to be mindful of that as they're contending over the next 150 laps to go.
And that is A.E. Pye coming off the front, burning for an exchange. 46 laps scored now, nearly to the quarter mark of this 200-lap race. We want to remind you that the Little 500 is brought to you by Subaru of America and Royal Subaru on the east side. So we haven't seen basically any big wrecks so far, just basically single teams going down.
No yellow flags. No yellow flags, which is good. And they'll stay green flag racing, and that happened yesterday during the women's race when the Delta Gammas went down. If there's a big wreck like that, but then in an instantaneous second, everybody's kind of back on their feet and nobody is seriously injured, our chief steward, Jonathan Perbitz, and his judging team spread throughout the infield today. They'll continue to let it go green flag racing. And for those teams that do go down, obviously it's good that you get right back up again, but to not have it slow down with the yellow caution, it makes it hard to get back into it.
So as we reach the quarter mark in this race now, coming up to 48 laps scored, what are kind of some main takeaways you've seen?
I mean, it's a pretty classic opening 50 laps of Little 500. The team cycled through their rosters as we would expect. So most teams have been maybe 10 to 15 laps and have almost gone through all 4 riders. And just being able to get your rider out there for your first set, that takes a lot of the nerves away from it. So then subsequent sets, it becomes easier and easier, and those nerves are away, and it's more about just, okay, let's get down to racing. As we see coming out of 4, SAE coming in for their exchange.
So SAE will make that exchange here on the front stretch. We just mentioned that dust in turn 1. Looks like a little bit of an okay exchange there between SAE, but let's send it down to Eddie Cotton for more.
Thanks, guys. Now, I actually just had a little conversation with the bike mechanics over at BKB, and they mentioned that dust might be just more of a visual thing. It really isn't having too much of an impact. They actually showed me more than a few bikes that look pretty clean. He seemed pretty upset about it. He would have loved some nasty stuff to clean up and more of a chaotic race here around turn 1. But he said the track is absolutely riding incredibly, and we're on an incredibly fast pace here. So not too much of an impact coming from that dust.
Isaac Neff himself, a resident now of Madison, Wisconsin, as we have a big wreck in front of our start-finish line. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8 teams down. Pi Lambda caught up.
Phi Delta Theta went down to that. They'll have to
Jet
get
Black down.
AE Pi down as well. Still on the ground as he's trying to work his way off the track. Now Chappie Blackwell instructing him to come get his bike.
Still green though. It looks like everybody got up after that.
As we see the replay there.
So that's going to eliminate a lot of teams from the front of the race.
And AE Pi still working to call over another bike. This could be very tough for their race as he just gets off the track. Jet Black running another bike over as well as they're just getting back on. So a whole lot of riders go down, and that knocks out a few teams as AE Pi now just getting their new bike here towards the start-finish line. They're already over a lap behind.
And it looks, in our camera angle on the front stretch, it looks like our leaders are now dwindled. We've got down to about 15 or 16 that are not chasing for their lives. Yeah, Kappa Sig, one from our front row. Now they are in danger of being caught.
So Jet Black, one of those teams we thought could come from the back, got caught up in that. They started from the 30th spot. Coach is Courtney Bishop, but that could be a tough go for them after that. And Jet Black was, or one of their riders was caught up in a wreck in lap 1 last year. Let's go learn more about Jet Black and Michael Schmall this year. Oh, and we have a wreck over there in turn 3 already, very early on in this race.
I never thought that I would be a cyclist. They always tell you that you should try and get to the front of the race as quick as you can from the back. And in doing that, I, on the very first lap, was coming around into turn 3, and I was on the outside, going fast, hit a loose patch of cinders, and lost control of the bike.
That was 2017 Michael Schmall. This is 2018 Michael Schmall. After his fraternity's charter was revoked and after his crash, he's ready for redemption.
But it's almost my own redemption. I don't feel as if I have to prove to anybody else what I can do on the track. And anything can happen out here. And you see it every year. It's just part of racing to crash.
And crashing right here in turn 3 was the best thing that could have happened to Schmall because he wound up at IU Health, where he'd go on to meet his current coach, Courtney Bishop, who was also in the hospital suffering from injuries during the Little 500. And yes, their hospital rooms were right next door to one another. Bishop, who's at the top of the screen in the yellow shirt, during lap 123, was struck by an oncoming rider and then was rushed to the hospital where doctors had to place 12 stitches in his mouth.
So Courtney Bishop is being stretchered off over there.
Oh my goodness.
So wow.
Having Courtney Bishop as a coach has been amazing, and it's really helped me improve as a rider.
As a rider, Schmall and Jet Black will get their chance to ride in the 68th running of the Little 500 come April 21st.
There really is nothing like riding in the Indiana Little 500.
Go, 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 go. Good.
So Jet Black was caught up in that wreck right in front of us a few moments ago as we were through 56 laps scored. They're in the main pack, but now have lost a lap.
Yeah, and Courtney Bishop is a staple of this race. He has coached several successful teams, always in the top 10, always in the hunt. Last year, he got caught up in a wreck himself. A bike ran into him, and Jet Black finished quite a few laps down. And so we'll see if they can ride smart and be able to get that lap back. It is incredibly difficult, but Courtney is a savvy guy, so we'll watch and see what happens.
And like you said, it'll be interesting to see how these teams get back into the race. And now we're going to send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more on that last wreck.
Well, that wreck happened right in front of BKB's pit, so I made a little sprint over there and had a conversation with alumni Charlie Hammond about what he saw, and he pretty much just saw a bunch of congestion, an overlap of wheels, and I asked him about how that might impact the race moving forward, and he's actually glad, as a team that was not involved in that wreck, that looks like it'll be an opportunity now to kind of cut the lead group about in a third almost, and that's a huge opportunity for some of these teams that are going to try and break away. And I asked him, how would you handle a crash like that if you were involved in it? And pretty much it's his go-to line with BKB. You got to be all in now. You got to do everything you can to exchange your bike, get back on the bike, and push to get back in that lead lap, and that's what they're trying to do. Back to you guys.
And Jordan, I'm sure you know a little bit of being all in, being a Black Key bull rider yourself.
Those guys are just on a whole different level than when I was on the team. I was a founding, not quite a founding member, but I was there in the early days and had success in Little 500, but the success that they've taken it to since I've left school is just really fun to see. Those guys have 22 alumni back, and again, as we talked about, that's spread throughout Little 500. We talked to Delta Chi, there's 40 guys back. We talked to Beta Theta Pi, they've got 15 guys, and that's Little 500 in a nutshell, just that building a program of success, and the success breeds more success.
And Black Key Bulls coming from the Bike-a-thon at Ball State. They've never finished outside the top 10. So you look at the main group coming around turn 2. Looks like that's Charlie Hicks and Sig Epp out in front at the moment.
And again, it looks like things have settled down just a little bit. People have gotten their wits about them and are just trying to ride some smart sets right now. And as Eddie had said, that crash took out about a third of our field. And down on the front stretch, team number 17, Alpha Sigma Phi, just kind of botches their exchange. And a lot of that it's difficult. You have to practice the exchanges to be able to pull them off successfully, because during race day, you are exerting all this energy, and that's going to make or break the race if you're bad at exchanges.
How big of a separator is that in even just those 1 or 2 seconds that could ultimately decide that race?
It makes all the difference in the world, because that guy that's getting on the bike is exerting so much more energy to get back to the front of the race, unlike some of the good ones that we've seen earlier, where you're getting this large gap off the front of the field. You are then giving it off to the teammate, and they then filter right back to the front. You're really doing it for your rider, your next rider getting on, so that it's kind of an easy job for them, and they can start their set without having to be panicked.
So as we enter these middle 100 laps, we're through 61 laps scored. A few teams down a lap, but we still have a pretty solid group at the front as of now. It's going to be interesting to see as we get into this middle 100 laps how things kind of shake out.
And now, just taking a look at our picture, the race has slowed down quite a bit. Everybody's breathe in easy. They are going 2-3 wide coming out of turn 4 now. And this is where you can kind of sneak your third or fourth best rider in the roster in the depth chart in, and the race just has a natural tendency to get a little bit slow in the middle goings of this race.
But Phi Kappa Psi back in the race for the first time. They've been hanging around as we're through 62 laps scored. At the 60 lap mark, they were the leaders. They've done a great job. There's been plenty of teams coming from behind as well, but now we want to welcome in a guest to the program, John Schwarb, author of The History of the Little 500. John, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
So you wrote the book, The History of the Little 500. I guess, where did that come from? Why did you want to do it?
You know what? When I was a student at the IDS, this is in the mid-90s, the 2 best beats on the newspaper were Bob Knight's basketball team and the Little 500, because everybody read your stuff, and the race, as today, was wildly popular. It's funny for me to come back now, because the Bill Armstrong Stadium I used to know, the press box and the big grandstand was over there, and the start-finish line. So this still takes getting used to me, even though they did this years ago.
And you wrote that not that long out of school, correct?
Correct. You know what? I didn't have a job straight out of college, and so I kind of came up with this idea. I love the history of the race, and it was coming up on the 50th anniversary. So I talked to some folks at the Student Foundation and the IU Press and the IU Foundation, and they loved the idea. And I had already done some digging into history when I was a student, doing stories, previewing the race. And yeah, it's just one of those right place, right time things.
Any very fond memories of you covering the race here for the IDS?
Gosh, it was so much fun at the IDS. We would get a big team of riders on race day, and we would put one person in each corner to watch for accidents.
Wow. Okay.
Because we would want to know, if something happened on lap 98 in turn 3, we would ask our turn 3 reporter what happened, and that's how. So after the race, we'd all go back to the newsroom, put our notes together,
and recreate the race.
You're right, pretty much, yeah.
So coming back here, I mean, it's got to feel pretty weird. I mean, you mentioned Bill Armstrong Stadium changing, but how about just Bloomington in general?
Boy, it's crazy, isn't it? My daughter and I went to a Chick-fil-A on 3rd Street today that didn't exist when I was in school. So, and I know they're redoing the golf course, and so a lot of things change, but still a lot of things stay the same. Like this race, it's always the same. The same Schwinn bicycles and the 33 teams and the pace car from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I love that part never changes.
Then, John, you've had a pretty fun career yourself. It's correct that you worked for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I was on their PR staff. I was there for the 100th running a couple of years ago, which was a tremendous event.
Sure.
And telling the stories about that race, and come Little 500 time, I'd always write some stories for the IMS website about the connections between the Indy 500 and the Little 500. So yeah, great place. Have you guys been to the Indy 500?
Yeah. I have not.
You have not?
I'm from out of state,
okay.
so I have not been there yet.
That's not a good excuse. That's not a good excuse.
It's not a good excuse.
Well,
I need
we'll
to
get you
there.
with some people and get you into the media center.
I need to get there, absolutely.
For sure.
I guess what are some similarities between this and that, other than it being basically it's named after it and it's modeled after it as well?
Well, that was one of my most favorite parts of the book, talking to Howdy Wilcox. He came on to the Student Foundation in 1950, and his first fundraising drive, they raised about $47,000. I mean, think about that. IU Day was just the other day.
Yep.
Big on social media, and the IU Foundation raises millions upon millions and millions. And that didn't happen back in 1950. And Howdy Wilcox said, well, I might not be in this job too long if I can't find a better way to engage alumni. And the way to engage alumni really is to do it while they're students.
Yep.
So, and his father won the Indy 500 in 1919. His father died when he was very young in a racing accident, but his dad, Howdy Wilcox, loved the Indy 500. And when he saw some students doing an impromptu bike race in 1950 around the auditorium of all places.
Yeah.
He kind of, the wheels started turning, so to speak, and he said, this might be something that could be our signature event for a student foundation. Get students engaged, and then hopefully when they're out of school, they'll want to donate back to the university.
Do you have a favorite part from researching all that you did to go into that book?
Gosh,
there's so much.
There is so much. The Breaking Away chapter was a blast, obviously. There's the connections, and Dave Blaze, who you saw in one of those pace cars earlier today, he was a shy kid from Speedway, Indiana, that used to sing Italian songs while he raced, and that character in Breaking Away, that is him. And the writer of the screenplay raced in the Little 500 and was friends with Dave, and that's just a tremendous story how that all became. And that movie holds up, right? I mean, not every movie from 1979 does, but that was a blast. And the first race is funny. In 1951, the team that won that first race, they had a really strong strategy to the event. They wanted to run 47-second laps, and they wanted to really strategize the race. They had a stationary bike in their pit, which no other team had, because they wanted to stay fresh. And these were all college athletes, and look at all the pits now. I mean, everybody's got this figured out. But back in 1951, they won that race by 5 minutes, and that was with a 3-minute race to repair a broken bike. That's how far out front they were. But the race has come so far along with strategy, and you see all these guys in the pits that have been doing this for years and years. It's pretty good stuff.
I got to ask you about it because it is no more, but what about the regatta? What happened to the regatta?
Wow, it's so funny. There were so many different parts of the weekend, right? I mean, there was a tricycle race. I rode in the tricycle race when I was in school. One of the weirder things I did. But they just had so many ways that the students wanted to, they raised money by selling tickets to all these events, but it was just different ways to have spirit and celebrate the weekend. It's different now. Do they still do that running race?
Not any longer.
Okay, they did that for a few years. I know. It's. I don't want to say it was better or worse back then. It was just different. Different ways of partying, different ways of celebrating. But the regatta, an off-campus lake event. I think that proved its period for a while. But you're not going to see that come back.
Well, John, thank you very much for joining us up here. Really appreciate it. Just read the book for the first time. It's absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot from it. If anybody out there has not read it, I highly recommend it.
If you're a fan of the race, it's a must-have for your library.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Enjoy your race day.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Take care.
That's John Schwarb, the author of The History of the Little 500. And as we're still looking at this race, we just saw Lambda Chi Alpha take their 5-second penalty. A team of all rookies. And it looks like Sigma Phi Epsilon also looking to make an exchange on the front stretch.
Sig Ep's been riding a great race. They've been aggressive. They've been at the front of the race, staying out of trouble.
As Tom Settle hopping onto the bike now and slotting in pretty nicely.
The Black Key Bulls keying up onto the backstretch, looking like they're going to be due for an exchange coming around the next time.
So we're through 72 laps scored. We saw that wreck just in front of the start-finish line, and that kind of took a few teams out of it. But there's just still a pretty big group at the front as BKB do make their exchange.
Will Ottenwiller exchanges off to Kevin Mangle.
So Mangle will hop back in there. Kevin Mangle, the second ITT
Sorry,
finisher.
I had those reversed. I think it was Kevin Mangle that brought it into Will. Both of those guys top 15 ITTers though. Good fitness. And similar, I think that it'll be a question of how many teams are at the end of the race, but just talking, going through the pits and wandering around, people just seemed content pre-race that their job, the number 2, 3, 4 guys, their job were to get their sprinter, their star to the end of the race and put it in their hands.
And in talking with Delta Chi, that was almost a little bit different because they want their main rider, Abel Barrera Duran, to do most of the brunt work and get them there to the end. And then they'll have one of their other 2 riders, to say 2 because they only are riding with 3 today.
Yeah, and that's what they did last year. And they've got a lot of history and tradition. They're the second winningest team in Little 500 with 8 victories overall. And they've got the great alumni support, but just in terms of the house support, getting those guys to come out and get them recruited to buy into what you need to do to be successful, it's pretty tough for them. So Abel being their star rider, when you only have 2 to begin, or when you already have 3 to begin with, he's going to have to ride a lot of laps in order to deliver his team to the leaders lap 200.
And talking with them, they're trying to bring that history back, the 25-year anniversary of their last win. And they're really looking to try to get back in that winner's circle. We're through 75 laps scored. We want to let you know that the Little 500 brought to you by Subaru of America and Royal Subaru on the east side.
As the teams come out of turn 4, the Betas on the front of the bike, they're on the front of the pack rather, and on the bike for them is Colton Rainier, Jr. Colton was a 22nd place in the individual time trials, and he is a native of Illinois.
And that was one of those teams we expected to come up from the back along with Bears and also Grey Goat. We've seen all 3 of those teams take some time at the front as we see Sig Ep on the front coming around turn 3. Here's 76 laps scored.
And the Betas have a great tradition. Again, they last won in 2013, and since then have been able to build up that tradition and breed success and find guys, recruit guys that buy into the program, buy into what they're doing, and then have that alumni support and all of those guys to come back and continue to help out and continue to make sure that the program stays at that elite level. Sig Eps are on the front. And again, it's kind of looking pretty slow. He's looking over his shoulder, and he wants help at the front. Looks like Cutters is behind him in green and just not pulling through really, so they're content to sit on as our SAEs are taking over and really pushing the pace.
And that is Joe Krahulik on the bike in his 4th race for SAE, looking to go out a champion.
And for him in his 4th race, you have nothing to lose. You have to put everything out there and in just nothing to lose, go for it. He has won individual time trials twice. He holds the 2nd and 3rd fastest times in the history of that event. Of course, Hans Arneson, our ITT record holder, but Joe Krahulik is the 2nd and 3rd fastest times, and that means that's a long list of people that you're pretty impressive with.
And SAE has 3 seniors this year, as we see Pi Lambda Phi coming in for an exchange.
And coming out on the turn 1 is Grey Goat, setting up for an exchange on the backstretch, and behind them, the Cutters.
And now we're going to send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has a report on the field.
Hi, I'm here with Eric Andrews here from Beta Cycling. What is your impressions of how this race has gone so far?
You know, it's surprisingly slow. It seems like there's a lot of teams really trying to conserve energy, expecting some fireworks later in the race. So right now we're just kind of hanging out and trying to keep it clean.
Now, we talked to you before the race about how you helped to establish this program. What went into that, and how valuable of an experience is this now?
It's pretty incredible sitting here, looking at the guys behind me and looking at the guys on the track and all the guys who came before us. You know, we're really a values-driven program, and you know, when you set out to build something, you know, my big brother in the house created this team, and I've really tried to continue that value set and that passion, and you know, I think that has manifested itself in this team today.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for that interview. And Beta definitely one of those teams who we've seen up there so far at the front.
Kappa Sigma setting up for an exchange close to turn number 1.
And for more on Beta, let's see what they did during their offseason to prepare for today.
December and January are not months made for biking. The snow and cold came to Bloomington this year, and biking outside wasn't necessarily an option. So let's bring you into the lab. The Little 500 race may be nearly 4 months away, but for Beta Cycling, the preparation is well underway.
Right now we're kind of, you know, transitioning from our long bay season. We took a trip down to Florida, Panama City Beach, did a lot of miles there, and obviously the weather's not too great down here in January in Bloomington, so we have to spend a lot of time inside, just grinding it out on the rollers.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. You know, the rides definitely seem longer when you're in here, but you know, some things we do, we put on race tape or movies, and we listen to a lot of music. And as Jack mentioned, it's really important to you know, have each other in here.
The gates to Bill Armstrong Stadium may be closed right now, but in about a month's time, the riders from Beta will be ready to get off those rollers and get on to the track.
We have about a month now, you know, before the track opens. And for us, that's go time. We're just trying to get as fit as possible right now, get our leg strength up, get our cardio up, so when that track opens, we can hit it hard and, you know, be one of the fastest teams out there.
Last year, Beta Cycling finished 4th overall and not on the podium. This year, they will look to be equally as competitive, but with a common goal in mind.
The number one goal is to enjoy it. You know, that's what you appreciate a lot more when you're cooped up in here, and then you can finally get out on a nice day. So when we're out, you know, we really try to have a good time. You know, we're all in better spirits.
Those may be their goals for now, but come April, winning the race will be their number one goal.
So that was more on Beta Cycling, led by Jack McNamara, their captain, a Riders Council member. And he's pulling it around turn 2, and he's still out front right now in this race.
And when we talked to him earlier before the pre-race, his teammate said that Jack's going to be the one on the bike for the finish. Jack, great figure in the Little 500 community. He serves as the president of the Little 500 Riders Council, which is a group of about 20 undergraduate students that all have at least 2 or 3 years of experience in this bike race, and they're on the men's teams and the women's teams and help to teach and educate the new riders of what's going on out here, and are really a great impact on the bike race and making sure it's safe and competitive for all those involved. And it goes very much back to what Dan Smith was saying at the Open, that in so many different capacities, Student Foundation offers leadership development opportunities where, of course, you're coming to IU, you're coming to Indiana University to get your degree, and that's going to be the most valuable thing that you take away. But all of this time and energy spent at Little 500, on your team, on Riders Council, on the steering committee, you're learning all of these other skill sets that are going to be with you for the rest of your life, that in a lot of ways are going to be more help you along the road more so than the degree does.
As we see Jet Black trying to get back into this race, Sigma Phi Epsilon also. How much could it wear on a team that potentially, if you're leading the pack for too long, could that affect you later on in the race?
Well, sure, and it's just like It's just like auto racing, where if you're on the front, you are expending the most energy. So being second wheel, third wheel, you're saving 33% less energy by drafting. And for us today, again, it's a little bit of a slower race, but you don't just want to be on the front trying to drive it the whole time, because you're going to get all tired, and then everybody else is going to be able to sprint around you very quickly, as we see coming to turn 1, our orange team of Sigma Chi probably setting up for an exchange in that turn 3 pit.
And that turn 3 pit on the very far left is where Cutters has been in the past few years.
And
so
for them, as the pole team, they like those end pits because you only have one neighbor, and you have that extra real estate that isn't part of the other pits, where they can continue on with that exchange if they have to.
Is that a lot of what goes into pit selection, is not having a neighbor potentially?
Yeah, it's a little bit of strategy, but you'll see down on the front stretch as we come across the start-finish line, both SAE and BKB, we were talking to them earlier, and that's why they picked their pits, because you've got that empty space on either side of you, so they too only have one neighbor. And again, we've seen earlier where we have some crowded exchanges coming in, those teams have to communicate really well in order to get the exchanges off when there's more than one going on at a time.
As we see Chappie Blackwell waving that blue flag with the orange stripe right through it to tell teams to move to the outside. We're kind of getting into that area where teams are falling out of the race.
And our judges and officials in Chappie Blackwell, our starter, does a really good job of being able to communicate with them. So everybody's on headset, and they're monitoring the situation of who's on the leader's lap and who is contending for the win. And if you've fallen, or you're straggling, they will verbally tell them to move to the outside to let our leaders through safely and to continue racing.
And now we have another guest up here with us. It's Zach Osterman of the Indy Star. Zach, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me. 2 years in a row, I didn't think I'd get asked back.
I know.
Well, I want to start this by saying the only reason you got asked back is because I made a little bit of a blunder, and I needed to correct the record. As we were outroing you and saying our goodbyes, I made the mistake of giving you the title of the Indiana Daily Student Reporter, which you had a tremendous history at the Daily Student and did very well there and set you up for success later on in life. However, the correction is that you are, of course, at the Indianapolis Star, the paper of record in Indiana.
Well, I appreciate the loyalty to the truth there. It's fine. I think in 2013, when I was calling the Missing Out final, I said Eric Anderson was in Pi Beta Phi. So we all make mistakes on live TV.
Yeah, live TV is difficult.
But just looking at this race today, obviously you're a big little 500 guy. What are some main takeaways you've seen so far?
It feels like it's been a slow race.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like beyond, and as I say that right now, the field has kind of come apart a little bit. We got some exchanges going on the front stretch, but it feels like it's been a race where everybody's a little bit cagey, marking one another. The turns seem to get loose fast. It's funny, we raved about the weather yesterday and today, but I think that it's been good for everybody except the riders who've been used to wet, cold conditions all spring, and all of a sudden this seems like a perfect day to ride. But if your body thinks 65 and sunny is hot, then today's going to be a little bit weird. And I think we're seeing maybe some teams that aren't totally adjusted to a nice spring day after the winter and spring we've had so far. And the track certainly just feels looser than I expected it to.
Well, and you're exactly right. We've had a very very cold spring here in Bloomington, and that lends itself to a slow track, and what happens is your tires kind of sink into that track. Whereas now, on a little bit more of a dry day, the looseness is coming up, and you can see those clouds of cinders, the dust kick up. Just practicing what you're not doing.
And a wreck around turn 1, heading into turn 2. Pi Lambda Phi in that wreck. Looks like Acacia as well, along with Chi Alpha. Chi Alpha, a new team in this race.
And Chi Alpha was with the leaders up until that wreck.
So it'll be interesting to see. They all get right back up. We're going to stay, it looks like, on a green flag. So good job for those riders just getting right back up and moving along.
And it's been interesting. We've had, I think that's the 3rd or 4th wreck now, but we still have not gone yellow. So there has not been such a giant wreck or an injuring wreck that we've had to slow it down to attend to those riders. Everybody just sort of bounces back up and keeps going. And Zach mentioned it is a slow-paced race, but in terms of overall time, not having yellow flags helps to make the total time a little bit faster.
I was convinced there was going to be something big there in the first about 10, 15 laps. It just wasn't coming apart at all. And again, I'd be interested to just kind of quiz the riders afterward. I mean, Jordan, you can remember training, I think, like the first 50-degree day in the fall, it felt like everybody was putting on their winter jackets because they weren't used to the cold weather. First 50-degree day in the spring, it's like, can I ride without a shirt on? It's so warm.
And I mean, yesterday it was a nice race, don't get me wrong. However, I was wearing my jacket and was chilly, and that's probably because I'm now a resident of Atlanta and have become soft to the coldness of the Midwest. However, I did see that a couple of our fans in attendance, they were, out in the bikinis and just letting it loose.
I was lathering up sunscreen yesterday.
But how much can that weather kind of play with your psyche?
It's, again, I don't think it's your psyche. I think it's that your body adjusts.
Okay.
And again, like I think back, the reason I brought up training was I think back to when I rode. Cold in the fall always felt colder to me than cold in the spring because I was used to warmer weather, and when it started to get cold, I needed time to basically just attenuate my body to that. And then when it got warm in the spring, even if it was 50, 55 degrees, suddenly that felt amazing. It felt almost tropical. And the point I make about it, it's what, 60, 65, it's sunny. There's a breeze, but it's not whipping around the track. It seems like a perfect day, but a lot of these guys probably haven't trained in weather this warm
for sure,
much, if at all, this season. So you're probably feeling a little bit different. I mean, your psyche is definitely going to be part of it, but physically, you're probably feeling a little bit off, even though, for a spectator, I mean, these are optimal conditions.
And that wind, we kind of saw it last year. It's also coming out of the northeast once again, so I don't know what it is the last 2 years.
Just race day.
Yeah.
Changing everything up for race day.
The trick is you go through all possible weather situations on quals, and then on race day it just throws a random curveball at you.
And quals was a day of its own. 30-degree weather, rain, sleet, and snow. Black Key Bulls was right in the middle of a snowstorm when they had their qual time. But now a nice day here as we are through 98 laps scored, almost halfway done with this 2018 Little 500. But as you look at the race right now, could it be like yesterday where we get a sprint finish, or could it be like last year and Black Key Bulls pulling away, you think?
Well, I think it's, look, we've still got half the race to go, and at this point, you're kind of in that slog right now. This isn't, without some kind of wreck or something unusual, this probably isn't the point in the race where you feel like anybody's going to want to try and make it. Everybody is just trying to kind of survive right now, see what unfolds, keep themselves out of trouble as much as possible. If they've got a sprinter, keep him rested as much as possible. I think that you'll see some accelerations just based largely on exchanges, but could it be a sprint finish? I think that's something we're going to get a better answer to starting at about lap 160, 165, because invariably, I think coming up here, I counted 20 teams still in the lead lap. There's no way that there are 10, 15, 20 teams in this field that all feel like they've got a sprinter capable of winning just a matchup field sprint. Somebody out there is going to feel like it would be better for them to try and get out front, maybe push the pace, then to pack out. It's just, that's not something that's going to happen very often at lap 100.
And I think a lot of the coaches we talked to, they said that they echoed the same thing, where you can't plan to just launch your attack in the middle of the race. You kind of have to be able to read the race and read what's going on and take advantage when other teams make mistakes. So if that's a botched exchange, if that's a wreck, then you're going to key in on that. And right now our leaders of all the people that we've talked about, the SIGEPs, the SAEs, the BKBs, amongst others, they've all ridden a pretty clean race thus far.
Yeah, I think SIGEP and Cutters have really stood out to me with the way that it feels like, and I keep saying things and then the opposite happens on the track, but generally it feels like I've been seeing them in the front half of the pack a lot. I've been seeing them take pulls, but maybe not force themselves into the wind too much.
Yep.
And it really, I mean, look, we're talking about all these teams in the lead lap right now, and I'm not hoping for a wreck by any means. I want to see everybody come through this race clean and healthy, but all it takes is one big wreck, and then your question about a field sprint, or the whole complexion of the race changes.
So still a lot of race to go. We're through 101 lap score, so just past that midway point. But just looking at this whole weekend, I mean, what's your favorite part of this weekend?
It's probably sometime between like the end of the women's race and the beginning of the men's race. That's when all the alumni kind of filter into town. Some make it for the start of the women's race. You know, some can't get off work and come in Friday night. That's when the town really just kind of seems to have the biggest Little Five vibe. Not just the parties, but look, it's for those who ride or rode, it's as much just kind of the fellowship and
the brotherhood.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that Friday night and then Saturday night is just kind of when everybody cuts loose a little bit, and everybody around the race is able to just take a breath. And Jordan will remember that better than me.
All of that pent up pent up stress is finally released, and you're done, and you're at peace, and you're calm, and just looking to celebrate and be joyous.
And then sleep all Sunday.
Yeah.
So 103 laps scored. Well, Zach, we really appreciate you coming up here with us and spreading your knowledge on the Little 500.
I don't know about that, but I at least talked and filled air for you for a little while. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Zach.
Appreciate it. So 103 laps scored. We want to remind you that the Little 500 is brought to you by Subaru of America and Royal Subaru on the east side. The wind picking up a little bit more for us on top of the press box. Looks like that American flag also flapping a little bit stronger than we've seen.
Now as we come out of turn number 4, one of our favorites, SAE on the front, followed by Cutters, followed by Sigma Chi and Black Key Bulls and Sigette.
So we've seen those top teams that we expected to be there. They have been there all afternoon long so far.
And again, I think that also having ridden a great race so far, Bears and Beta Theta Pi definitely have been up there, as have the Grey Goats, our runner-up of the 2017 race.
And Grey Goat's been a team that has been impressive, obviously led by Sam Stratton coming out of that 14th spot, but then you got 2 freshmen and another junior who didn't ride last year. So you got one experienced rider as we see Cutters coming in for an exchange.
Yeah, and it's their 11th appearance in team history, this 2018 race. 11 for 11 so far since dating back to 2008. Their highest finish, again, as I mentioned before, was last year at that 2nd spot. And they had a pretty good team pursuit, coming in 8th place for the team pursuit event, 15 laps against the clock.
So we saw Pi Lambda Phi go down in that wreck around turn 1, going into turn 2 while we were talking with Zach, and looks like they're still about just shy of a lap behind. So
yeah,
still a lot of work for them.
For him, it's tough because you know that they're coming up on you, and you almost have an entire lap that you have to make up. And as the wind's picking up, there's nowhere to hide really, because there's a good group of about 20 in that peloton. Some of them on the leader's lap, not all of them though. And then there's just maybe another scattered 10 to 12 riders, just solo and single throughout the rest of the track right now.
So 106 laps scored. Pi Lambda Phi now coming in for another exchange along the front stretch.
Probably
you see on the right side of your screen.
Swallowed up by the pack right here on this exchange to go to lap down. And coming around the outside, we've got SAE going to set up for an exchange on the front stretch coming around, and on their wheel, Forrest.
Looks like Beta trying to take that wheel as well.
Beta and Sig Chi.
So Sig Chi, they still got to go all the way back around. So this could be a decent swing for Sig Chi if they can get this right.
That's pretty aggressive. You got to like it. And again, that's just one of the sort of strategies of having that pit, that you're not necessarily marked all the time. And those guys right now, they've got a rider with 1 year of experience. David Holdcamp, their senior, has 2 races under his belt. He was 6th overall in ITTs. And Nick Faupel, also a senior, has 1 year of experience from Henderson, New York.
So Sigma Chi makes their exchange over near turn 3. And a pretty good exchange there, and they'll just hop right back into the pack. Coming around turn 4 now.
And again, Sigma Chi, they have a good tradition. They won in 1994. 1 win all time. As we come into turn number 1, Sigma Phi Epsilon making a move to the outside, getting to the front. Kappa Sig really trying to close that down, stringing it out, and said, we're not going to let you off so easy with that.
It looks like Charlie Hicks set to come back onto the bike. So how would you say that Sig Ep has ridden this race so far? They've been towards the front for most of the day.
They've stayed clean, and they've put out energy when they needed to, and crowded exchange going. It looks like Kappa Sig elected not to do the exchange that time around.
I don't think the rider could get out of the middle of the pack. So he'll have to work on that. But how kind of dangerous can that be for a rider that wants to exchange but then gets stuck in the middle?
You know, it depends on how tired they are. If they're in the middle and they're stuck, then you're just going to go backwards and get spit out the back of the pack. Hopefully he can sit in and recover a little bit and be able to make another go at it in a few laps. As Noah Voiles of the Black Key Bulls is coming around on the outside, coming out of our turn number 4 to exchange off to, looks like Kevin Mangle of Valparaiso, Indiana.
So that's a clean exchange there for Black Key Bulls. But now we're going to send it down to Eddie, who's on the stage with a very special guest.
Thank you very much, Josh. I'm here with Dave Blaze, the Little 500 legend that Breaking Away is named after. And tell me just a little bit about your experience when you first saw the film.
Well, I was very excited about the whole thing. In fact, I had heard that Steve Teschich had written a screenplay about me called Eagle of Naptown, and later found out that when he tried to get that produced, why the studio wanted him to make changes. And then later, he wrote another screenplay called Cutters, which had nothing to do with me or the Little 500 or biking. But anyway, he tried to get that off the ground, and they squashed that as well. So Peter Yates, who was the director, had suggested he combine the 2 scripts, and that's what he did. And that was accepted as the script for what became Breaking Away. So anyway, when Steve called me back in '78 and said, hey, we're making a movie down here, and we want your name to be the main character and all of that, and I said, sure. And anyway, I came down and then ended up being in the road race, and then they hired me to be the announcer for the Little 500 portion of it. And of course, to have something named after or based sort of on your own experiences, it was very flattering, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And I think the thing that's great about it is not so much that it was about a bike race, but it dealt with all the issues that youth have in growing up. So yeah, it was a delight to be a part of the whole thing.
And what does it mean to you to have that movie be a film that almost everyone before they get to Bloomington has to watch? I mean, I watched it last night.
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, I'm happy that that it was as popular as it was and is, and so sure, it's a great pleasure to know that I was part of something that gives so many other people pleasure.
Now, what do you personally remember about your biking experience here on campus?
Well, I mean, I started out as a nobody, and through hard work, I got up to a point where I was perceived to be a threat. And anyway, after having the ability or having the chance to race in the thing back in 1962 and to win the thing, which sort of revolutionized the race, because prior to that, the race was ridden in very short series of, 6 laps, 4 laps, 2 laps, 8 laps, something like that. And I rode the first 40-some laps before exchanging, and with our success, and by having me ride as much as I did, it demonstrated that you could have success doing that. And what happens when you do that is packs form. So after that, that's when you started seeing packs out here at the race, and guys started training differently, and it's really made the race a lot more competitive and open to a lot of teams that maybe in the past would have never had a chance. So instead of being a threat to the race, it really saved it and made it even better.
Well, now you look at this fantastic race, and it's a fantastic event, and what keeps you coming back?
You know, it is for me, and it was a pathway of self-discovery. I didn't think much of myself before I got involved in this, but having suffered in preparation for this and having gone through this experience, it gave me, I gained in self-respect, which helped me to actually evolve into a more complete person. So for me, it was more than just a bike race. It was a life-saving experience. So of course I come back every year. It's like going back and being reborn a little bit.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. And thank you very much, Mr. Blaze.
You're most
Really appreciate it. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie. We have another very special guest back here up in the booth. It's Tyler Hart of Black Key Bulls, and now surrounded by Black Key Bulls up here.
How you doing?
Good. Thank you for being with us. You're coming back as an alumni of Black Key Bulls. What does it mean to come back to this race every single year?
It's definitely special to come back to Bloomington for the Little Five every year. It's hard as an alum sometimes to not be out there on the track and to have a role to play in the actual race itself. I definitely get nervous watching the guys, but it's fun, and have a good time seeing everybody that I raced with when I was a rider here at IU.
It's more nerve-wracking as an alum than it is actually on the bike, isn't it?
It is. You kind of wish that you could reach out your hand and give them a push, or I always tell people if I could control them like a puppet, I would, and drag them around the track. You wish you could do something. But you just have to know that it's in their hands and that they're prepared for it, and they're going to do the best that they can.
So it looks like Cutter's going off the front now, maybe setting up for an exchange. As Cutter still has to get a bike over here as they're going to do a bike-to-bike exchange. They're going around turn 2.
And a lot of that goes in race day. You've just got all that personnel that they have specific jobs, and the mechanic is one of the most important of all because they have to basically be doing 365 and keeping track of where their rider is, and they're the first to respond to a wreck. They have to know when the exchange is coming in to be able to get that new bike for the new rider getting on.
As Cutter is now coming in to make their exchange around the front stretch.
Really a large gap for them. He'll slot right back into the front, so the rider that just got on, he, again, doesn't have to expend a lot of energy in order to be the fresh rider on.
So Tyler, you've presumably been down there next to the BKB pit, but what's it like seeing the race from up here and be able to kind of look at the broad scene of things?
Yeah, this is really, really neat to be up here on top of the press box. It's really one of the few places where you do get a really good view of everything. It's difficult when you're down low to see around some of the tents and the medical tent and the cars that are on the infield, and that's something that the teams really do have to contend with during the race. If there's a crash that's behind the tent or is obstructed by something else, it can be difficult to see, and you may lose time during that. So a different view up here, it's neat to see.
I always tell people, particularly when I was race director, that I would always watch it from inside the press box with our PA announcer, Chuck Crabb, and then that's where we run the timing and scoring system. And it's climate controlled and it's nice, and you don't have to deal with the elements, and you can see everything. And again, it's fun to have the alumni on the back of the pit and supporting the guys and be able to touch them and give them advice or give them input as they're coming in, or just those words of encouragement is really what it's all about. But the perspective from there, it's such a bad place to watch the race from that press box is great, stands are great, and everybody here in attendance is having a good time today.
Or at least watching it on TV as well.
Yeah, catching the broadcast. Yes, that's where I would watch it from.
Streaming around the world.
So what's kind of been the word of mouth going around there in the BKB pit? Do they like where they're at right now?
I think so. I think they're in a good place. They have the strength and the depth of the talent, and they're using that, conserving riders for the end, and using people strategically as they are, and keeping their rivals close, and the rivals are doing the same thing. You see a lot of the top teams really marking each other today, and it's held the group together a lot.
Yeah, I would say a lot of mirroring going on for sure of the top contenders.
Yeah, and actually now for the first time we're really starting to see it thin out a little bit more. The pack and a lot of the lap traffic held in together for a long time, and starting to string out a little bit here.
Yeah, and as we say that, though, again, the wind continues to pick up. It started at the start of the bike race, it was maybe 2-3 miles an hour, and the flags in turn number 3 is pretty steady. So I would say that we're at least up to 8 to 10 miles an hour out of that northeast.
We're through 123 laps scored. And we have a couple riders down in turn 1. Looks like that is Lambda Chi Alpha and AE Pi.
I think
so.
AE
Pi
is
way behind.
They got caught up in another wreck, so they're not having the best of days right now.
As the main group coming around turn 4 now, coming towards the front stretch.
Kappa Sig and Fiji setting up for their exchanges.
Now Fiji's going to bypass that and wait till the next one.
And it looked like Jack Martin just got off the bike, the freshman from Noblesville, Indiana, in his first race.
So 124 laps scored, but what's it like seeing your team win the race last year and then just coming back each and every year and seeing how much this race changes?
Seeing them win last year, that's always the ultimate goal. It's amazing. I was super proud for those guys. I know because being a rider myself, you know how much work goes into winning this race. So I was just really proud for them. Happy that their hard work paid off, and that's really goes into a lot of what Dave Blaze was just saying right before I came on, is that he was able to become somebody through the race that it takes a hard work to be one of the top teams, and it's good for those guys to have that payoff in the end.
And Zach made mention of it too before you were on, that you come back and you feel the energy, you feel the community just walking around town of Little 500 Week last night, and now it's just that energy and the brotherhood of all these people. They just get drawn back, and that's Little 500. There's just something about it. It can't be explained, but it's woven into the fabric and woven into this culture to be something truly special here at Indiana University.
Absolutely, it's a subculture. It's its own community. It's coming in is a homecoming for a lot of the people that we rode with. I know Jordan would say the same.
For sure.
Well, Tyler, we really appreciate you coming up here. There's just over 70 laps left, so we'll let you get down there, and maybe you'll be celebrating come the end of today.
Sure hope so. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. So 127 laps scored. And like you mentioned, the pack is kind of thinning out a little bit, but still all those main guns, those main teams still up there.
And hanging tough out of the picture is our Jet Black team. We saw much earlier that they were off of the back and got caught up in a wreck, and they've held steady at a 17-second gap. So they're about a half lap down and just battling to try to stay in it and stay on that leader's lap. And so as that rider comes out of turn number 4, or as the pack comes out of turn number 4, he's going into turn number 1. So slowly but surely dwindling down the number of teams that are on our leader's lap, and that's one that's in fear of losing that lap.
So Black Key Bulls and Beta out in front, along with Sig Ep, who is just in front of them. Looks like he's the Sig Ep rider looking for where the rest of the pack is to maybe find a wheel.
GTs, Wildman and Prince, and fifth third bank.
So 129 laps scored. And this is a part of a race where teams is trying to hang in until we get to those final 40, final 50 laps. And once again, Xavier Martinez has not ridden yet for Black Key Bulls, presumably saving him for a potential sprint finish. So they seem like they're in a fairly good spot. And a lot of riders riding in this race, but some are riding for a bigger cause. We send it to a package now about riding to Riley Hospital.
Nothing says Indiana University quite like the IU Dance Marathon or the Little 500 race. IU senior Michael Schmall shares his passion for both events as he rides to Riley.
I did a one-way trip from northern Indiana. It was really successful. A lot of people got behind it and thought that this was something that was really great, and I already in my head started making plans on how I could do it again the next summer, but then how also I could improve it.
days of the weekend I would ride 100 miles. So I just felt like I was going to do it anyway, and he was a good friend and it was a good cause, so it was something good to be involved with.
Biking 100 miles in one day is not quick and easy. Those who participate in the Ride to Riley bike 50 miles from North Indy, stop at Riley's Children's Hospital to spend time with kids, and then bike another 50 miles to Bloomington.
I was strong enough to do it, and I was really inspired by the kids and what they go through at Riley on a day-to-day basis.
Obviously, I figured out how far I could push myself because I could not move after that ride, but then also got a lot of joy in knowing that I helped raise a good amount of money for Riley.
With the Little 500 race approaching, Michael Schmall and his teammates have been training since August when they rode to Riley. But Schmall's passion for helping children in need does not stop here.
We'd love to have more people come out and join us, so if you want to put the pedals to the metals and help support the kids at Riley this summer, we'd love to have you.
Schmall has raised over $2,000 for IUDM over the past 2 summers, and he doesn't plan to take his helmet off just yet.
Me and this little bear that I've had on my back for the past 8 hours are gonna go walk inside, and we're gonna hand it off, and then I'm gonna go get a really big chocolate milkshake.
With the IU Media School, I'm Molly Levine.
So a fun story there, and just most of what makes this Little 500 so fun and unique. And Michael Schmall on the bike right now for Jet Black.
And actually, I had made the mistake earlier. I thought that they were down 17 seconds, but the reality is they actually had caught back up to the leaders after their initial wreck, and now they're leading the bike race. So they're off the front by a healthy margin of that 17-second timestamp. In addition, like geography-wise, it's over a straightaway lead right now with more than 75 laps to go.
How much can that wear on a team just being that far up?
Again, last year the Blackie Bulls were able to do it, and it seems right now that people aren't necessarily too concerned about what Jet Black is doing. They are aware of it, and they're just letting it go. And with the wind as strong as it is today, being solo out there out front is very tiring for him. He's putting out much more energy. But on the flip side,
135 laps have been scored.
If the pack plays too much poker in the back, they might be able to let him get even farther, and then he could get a whole lap on the field. So we'll see how it happens. And they're going in for an exchange right now as the teams come into turn number 1. And usually what you'll see when it's a mid-race attack like this is you've got your 4 riders, and you can go through a rotation and hold it for, call it 20 laps. But once you go back through that rotation again, after that individual rider has put out that effort, it becomes much more difficult the second time around, and that's when the field usually starts to draw back in. So right now it's still holding steady at about a straightaway.
136 laps scored, so Sig Epp right now actually in second place as Sig Kai potentially setting up for an exchange, trying to burn around turn 1 and into turn 2.
And Sig Epp's really showing their fitness. They're riding really well. I think that they learned a lot last year. Again, they were kind of like Jet Black, where they made some moves in the middle of the race and tried to get off the front of the bike race and ended up getting spit out the back when the BKBs made their move late in the race. And I was talking to Coach Skivett earlier this afternoon, and he was saying, their goal is to really play it smart and not necessarily exert too much energy more than they need to get to lap 200.
So Sig Epp definitely one to watch here in these last 63 laps. Blackie Bulls also right in there, SAE. All those big teams that we expected are still right there, but it's Jet Black out in front, coached by Courtney Bishop, with just a bunch of different riders from different teams in past years. Michael Schmall was riding for SNU last year. Patrick Wisdom did not ride last year. He was actually part of the media riding for the IDS, but now he is back in the race this year for Jet Black. So something to watch is now Grey Goat potentially burning around turn 1, but it's still Jet Black as they're around turn 2, so they still got a pretty sizable margin.
And interestingly, the Jet Black rider has some lap traffic that he's being able to work with. So he's not having to, you can see it in our picture at the bottom. There's 3 other riders that he's with, and they're not necessarily on the leader's lap with him, but they're helping him out. And so, you know, maybe he got together with them and he said, hey, you guys are down and we are off the front right now. I'll buy you a beer later if you help me out in this race.
And Jet Black going in for an exchange around turn 2. And there you go. The pack has definitely caught up to them now, and Jet Black falls back, and Sig Epp now back out in front, 139 laps scored. So as we come into our last 60 laps, Sig Epp taking the lead, but Jet Black still hanging in. We send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more about Jet Black.
Thank you very much. Now, I actually spoke with a few of the members of Jet Black down there in the pit, and they talked about how they were able to recover so quickly after their early crash, and it really came down to the rest of the field easing up and giving them an opportunity, and they're just taking advantage of it. When you ask them about it, they're saying, we're pretty much just riding the race of our lives right now, riding our hearts out. And I asked them about the strategy moving forward. They're looking at Black Key Bull's strategy from last year, potentially trying to lap the field, but as we see right now, that's probably not going to work out, but they're ready for a sprint if they have to be. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for that report. It's Beta and Sig Epp along with Cutters now falling right behind. This Jet Black has fallen back a little bit, but you just wonder if all that energy they had to expend coming off the front will cost them later on.
As we see it down the backstretch, Beta Theta Pi really making some strong moves, stringing it out, setting their next rider up for an exchange. Cutters on their wheel, Sig Epp in single file right in our top 10 teams.
So those are where the leaders are, but a team in their first race this year is Delta Sigma Phi. Courtney Robb has more on that team.
Staying very much up to detention, team 16.
Okay.
The Bears setting up for an exchange. They're on the backstretch.
It's Delta Sigma Phi.
You know, we were a fraternity getting off the ground, and I'd been talking to people, and we just, you know, never founded a bike team because we didn't have the members, or we didn't have the people dedicated for it.
The bike team came to life when Chapman returned to campus his sophomore year. The off-campus fraternity was new to IU and had limited resources. That first year, Delta Sigma Phi failed to qualify for the race. But the second year, it almost looked as if they had a chance. And then their wheel flew off.
So we were on our third rider. He got through almost half a lap, and then it was just a manufacturer's error. The mechanic was saying that the wheel just couldn't take the pressure or something along those lines. So it was definitely kind of demoralizing because your first run, as most teams know, is probably when you have the most adrenaline, you're the most freshest. When that wheel happened, you know, we don't want to say we quit or anything like that, but it was definitely a little demoralizing to think that, wow, we were doing so well, and all of a sudden.
Still, Delta Sig hasn't given up on their dreams of qualifying just yet.
Behind me, it may look just like any other house, but if you walk inside, you will find a basement masquerading as a bike room. With less than ideal weather conditions for biking here in Bloomington and limited resources, Delta Sigma Phi has been forced to get a little creative.
The fundamentals of a team just come down to like your willingness to grind, like having a bike, having rollers, like the minimum stuff. And I think we've got that covered and more. It obviously gives other teams advantage, when they have certain rooms. But for us, it's more just like, are we gonna, bust our tails? And if we can do that, and we've got the bikes, and we're fine.
This team depends on hard work, dedication, and well, Troy Chapman.
Yeah, I don't know what we'd do without him, honestly. He's been on the team for 4 years now, so he knows all the ins and outs.
Troy has really kind of gone out and sought advice from other people, other riders, other captains, and he's built, a pretty stable program.
For Delta Sig, the Little 500 is less about winning, but more about creating a legacy.
I like to think that, the underdog story is the people you want to root for, just because, we failed, we know what it feels like to, come up short, and that's a terrible feeling, but I think it'd be really inspiring for me, at least, to see that after 2 years, I could actually finally, in my senior year, ride. It'd be kind of at least a storybook ending for me, and hopefully something that would kind of revitalize our team and get people motivated for the future, seeing what it looks like.
So Delta Sigma Phi may not be up towards the top today, but still a good story for them. But some news on BKB is they finally have a new rider now who hasn't ridden yet on the track.
So both of us missed it up here in the press box just because it had happened so fast. But both the Black Key Bulls and the Cutters found themselves a little bit down from the leaders and ended up putting, I think it was some mechanical issues that I don't necessarily think it was a wreck, but both of them were down and they ended up working together. And they're back up to the lead group. The SAEs and the SIG-EPs had put it hot for a little bit, but everything's all back together and it slowed back down again.
Still Jet Black and SIG-EP off the front right now, as SIG-EP now pulls in front. Kappa Sigma also up there along with Sig Chi and Fiji in that candy striped jersey. So we're through 147 laps scored, so almost into the final quarter of this race. Is this kind of where you expected things to be at right now?
Yeah, I think so. The race actually is doing pretty well time-wise. So we're on track to be probably right under 2 hours and 10 minutes. Last year the race went over 2 hours and 10 minutes, and the race record, of course, is 2:01, but a lot goes into that. So I think that we'll probably end up about 2:05 to 2:10 a lapse time overall.
The Little 500 is brought to you by Subaru of America and Royal Subaru on the east side. So 148 laps scored. And we have ourselves a pretty solid finish coming up if things hold as they are right now.
And Josh, last year it was same sort of thing. We had a lot of teams all together, but as we know, in this bike race, the last 50 laps are where you really separate the men from the boys, rather. And that's where the race gets hard. So I expect we'll show a lot of these teams off and set ourselves up for a great finish.
And now we send it down to Eddie Cotton.
Thanks, guys. I'm here with Charlie Hammond, BKB legend and defending champion. What's it like being back as a defending champ?
It feels good. It definitely, when you come back off of a race win, there's no like bittersweetness there. It's just sweetness. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to see my team in yellow. So it's good.
Now you've been in the pits this entire race. What have you seen out of this race so far, and what do you think it's going to turn out to be?
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting race. There's been a couple crashes. Jet Black was up like a half a lap. That was a little scary at one point, but I think it's all good now. We actually just popped a tire, which we really lucked out because it happened right in front of our pit. But if that would have happened on the backstretch, we would have probably lost a half lap. So it's been an interesting day. It seems like cleaner than I expected, especially with how dusty turn 1 is. But it's going to be a good one. I think it's going to be a sprint finish.
And then looking at Xavier, he's the second ITT rider. He's seemed to be a little bit rested, but now we see him out in the field. What have you seen out of him, and how confident are you in him?
I'm very confident. So this is actually his first set. He didn't enter the bike race until lap 140 or something. He got dealt a little bit of having to catch back on after our flat, but I'm really confident in him. And he's been chill this whole time. Like, he's just vibing out, and I love it. I love to see it.
And lastly, how meaningful of an experience is it for you to now be almost like a coach for your guys?
Oh, it means so much to me, especially seeing these seniors kind of come into leadership roles and seeing Xavier grow up on the team, and they've just matured so well and really hold themselves with the utmost character. And that's what it really means for us to be BKBs, is like to be those nice people, even if we're the best team or the worst team.
Thank you very much, man. Best of luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And Black Key Bulls still hanging tough with those 3 senior riders. But they're right up there towards the top. SAE off the front right now.
And thanks for that reporting, Eddie. Again, it happened so quick, and we saw the scramble happening on the infield, and just wasn't sure what the cause of that gap to the leaders for them was. And having a wreck like that, so again, with Little 500, the rules of the race, you're only allowed to have 2 bikes, and you have to share it between your 4 riders. And generally, teams try to match up as best they can in terms of fit and in terms of length for how tall people are to get on the bike. And if you have one bike go down, so like they did, they had to get a new wheel on there. Xavier's basically having to ride this until the mechanic Isaac Neff, who did it really quickly, be able to get that bike up and working again.
So we've seen those mechanics be worked pretty hard here today.
That's right. So again, another critical piece of your personnel, your team. It's more than just the 4 riders on the bike. A lot goes into it race day.
153 laps scored. We are finally in this last quarter of the bike race. Beta right now off the front, and they look like they're picking up some speed around turn 1, potentially going into an exchange coming around.
And I really think that's interesting. The interview down in the pit that Eddie just did, Charlie made the comment that this was Xavier's first set. And it was funny last year, 2017, Ryan Knapp coaches both the Thetas who won yesterday, and they won last year, of course, and then he coached the BKBs and Thetas again this year. He's been implementing a very, very similar strategy for both races. So Xavier is on the bike right now, and he's fresh, has not ridden all day. This is his first set, and he's just throwing it down to these riders that have been in for quite some time.
And you can see Ryan Knapp in the pit right below us signal one more lap to Xavier, who is coming around now halfway done with this lap.
And I think
he'll exchange.
I think right now just using Xavier's freshness to get a little bit of a gap to shed some of those teams. So Sigep will come up very quickly on them. But Xavier goes around again, so he's continuing. So behind him are the Sigeps and the Cutters working hard to get up. And now Joe is about a full straightaway lead as the race is completely strung out and single file and very quick.
So a bold move from Ryan Knapp to send Xavier on another sprint lap to try to gain some separation. It looked like Sigep and Cutters also followed suit to try not to fall too far behind.
And behind them, Grey Goat and Beta. So I think it'll come back together, but you're at least making the other teams a little bit nervous, given the history of what they did last year.
And a good exchange from Black Key Bulls. Sigep, Fiji, Pylam, and Cutters all setting up, but they're going to bypass once again.
So now you've got Noah Voiles on the bike. The Sigeps and the Cutters look like they're trying to go in for an exchange. So he just gets right on the wheel, and he'll get towed around the track. Grey Goat in there as well.
So this is kind of that part of the race, like you were saying, where things are going to start to pick up.
It's a little bit early. It's a little bit early. Last year, the fireworks really started to get underway at lap 170, 175, and where you've got 43 laps remaining.
And here comes Sigep now for their exchange.
And so let's watch Noah and see what he does. He looks behind. He doesn't want to punch the gun too fast.
Cutters at the last second basically pulled into their pit and decided to exchange. And now they have some work to do to catch back up.
So again, here we go. It's coming together. But we've eliminated some of those other teams that were still on our leader's lap, and now we're down to the big boys. I think we're in that main group right now. There's definitely less than 10.
Grey Goat also hanging strong in there. As now Forrest coming in for an exchange on the front stretch along with Kappa Sigma. They're setting up for one.
And with Little 500, it's fun. You know, that was one punch. You know, and it's like boxing. So you're throwing a punch and you're feeling how that went. And so often it's not the first punch, it's not the second punch, but sometimes those counters that you really start to break people and break the race wide open.
Kappa Sigma was setting up for an exchange, but the rider on the bike nodded his head and said, no, I'm going at least one more. We'll see if he sets up for one more now on this lap. 159 laps scored.
Receive a free piece of vintage swag or $2 off new merchandise.
So now 40 laps to go. Joe Krahulik out in front now for SAE.
I actually think that's his brother, Rob. Those are Krahulik's.
They look just the same.
Yeah,
there
it's
you
that
go.
big frame, wide shoulders. So his younger brother in his first race doing a terrific job today.
Freshman Rob, 23rd in ITTs. SAE, though, right in there. Like Eddie said earlier, just get Joe to the end of the bike race, and he could bring it home for SAE.
Now Beta taking it to the front.
And Now here comes Kappa Sigma. They're going to exchange, and they're still hanging right in this bike race. They might lose some time, though,
and see,
on this exchange.
That, for me, that shows their inexperience. They were pretty even with the pack, and unlike all the exchanges we've seen all day where you're zooming off the front and trying to establish that extra time, that extra gap, that was more or less even. So that rider, the more that happens, I think the harder it's going to be for them to get back up with subsequent exchanges.
Sigma Chi also hanging in there. That 7th team in qualifications. They have that turn 3 pit. Phi Psi, though, right out in front, and they're a team that is hung in there, a bunch of rookies, but they have hung in all day long.
On the bike for Phi Psi right now is Albert Laval, sophomore from Clarendon Hills, Illinois, riding in his first race.
All of these guys riding in their first race, and it's an impressive feat what they're doing right now. The 50th anniversary of the 1968 title for Phi Kappa Psi, and they're just happy to be back in this bike race right now.
And there you go, Phi Kappa Psi coming off the front, coming out of turn number 4, going into turn number 1.
Phi Psi's in pursuit, team 12.
So it looks like they're going to come in and do a bike-to-bike exchange, which is being set up at the moment as they come around turn 2 out in front of the main pack.
And it'll be Albert Laval to Brian Emmons on the next time around. Brian is a sophomore in his first race. Bloomington, Indiana native.
It's people in the Phi Psi pit telling them to make some noise. They come in for the exchange on the left side of your screen.
And let's see.
This looks to be pretty solid.
Very comfortable for him.
And now Fiji coming off the front, along with SAE and SIGEP following him. Bears also right behind those 3. So is this a spot in the race where you're maybe trying to set up your sprinter, either whether he's on the bike right now, get him off, or potentially get him some time?
I think that you're playing, whereas you start the race and you're trying to go through that rotation. When you get to the last 50, you have to do a little bit of math and figure out, okay, if we want to put our sprinter on at lap 195 or 190 or whenever it may be, how do we approach this? What's our rotation going to be like moving forward?
So now going on to the bike for SAE is Sean Marks, another senior for this team, rode in his first race last year. He's a little bit of catching up to do, along with Fiji, who has now fallen significantly behind those leaders. So it looks like BKB setting up for an exchange. They're coming off the front, Kappa Sigma as well, along with Beta, as they just get that bike over there in time for the bike-to-bike exchange. So Beta, Black Key Bulls, and Kappa Sigma all going in for exchanges, along with Fidel. So they bypass the exchange. So we're seeing some extra burns coming
now
right now.
Yeah, these are some punches, counter punches. And honestly, that he was ripping it down the front stretch and was ready to go, and got caught by the SIGEPs, who's marking him now, and he might have been a little bit better off to do the exchange 1 lap earlier. So now this is going to be a marked exchange for him coming out, and give an opportunity for SIGEP if they want. They can roll this.
So here comes the exchange for Black Key Bulls.
And see, so they're kind of off the back a little bit, and that would have been a good opportunity for SIGEP to really punch it.
And now we're going to send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more.
Josh and I talked to some of the guys over at Phi Psi who are doing an incredible job so far in this race, and I just asked them about their strategy and what's going into this performance, and they said the big key, staying incognito. They pretty much don't want anyone to notice that they're doing well, which now is not going to work because everyone sees them at the top of the field, but that's really their strategy. They're trying to make sure people don't notice them when they're at the front of the pack so they can make those late moves when the pack slows down, and we'll see how aggressive they get as this race kind of reaches its end. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you very much, Eddie, as Cutters makes an exchange over around turn 1.
Yeah, and again, Phi Psi has a lot of history and tradition, so the people down in the pit and their supporters really know the ins and outs of this bike race, having so many wins over the history of this event. And coming in, they're all new guys, and nobody's really paying much mind to them, but they're hanging tough and right up there with everybody else.
Fiji's going down just before the scoreboard.
So Fiji is down around turn 1. They'll have to get another bike over there.
So they were on our leader's lap and riding a very great race.
But just after their last exchange, they had fallen back. So now they're almost 3/4 of a lap behind. They have a lot of work now to do. That could be a crushing blow for them today.
And again, at the end of the bike race, it's these mistakes that add up that are starting to shed some of the teams and really get down to the nitty-gritty of who we're going to see contending for the checkered flag in the Borg Warner Trophy of this 200-lap feature.
So 169 laps scored. A team we haven't really mentioned out there.
Getting out of the saddle, going into turn number 1.
Looking to set up an exchange. 3PH also in there as well. Haven't mentioned them much today. SAE and Sean Marks now off the front. It looks like all string out, trying to catch a wheel and make up some time, or at least keep pace. So SAE setting up for an exchange. Sig Ep setting up for an exchange on the front stretch. So we head into the final 30 laps.
And that he got marked immediately by SAE. And again, a crowded exchange, so it looks like Sean Marks of SAE is going to have to go around again in order to get the exchange off.
Does that favor one side or the other to potentially have to pull an extra lap or burn an extra lap?
It depends. Again, you're budgeting enough energy in order to get off the front, and you're trying to go as fast as you can. I think that he'll be all right, and it looks like he's doing really well with a great turnover as we see the pack coming in. There he is. He's coming out of turn 4.
So Fiji's still
and
very
I think
far behind.
It looks like they're setting up Joe to go back onto the bike.
Could this potentially be the last exchange for SAE?
Again, it was a very savvy move by Ryan Knapp in the women's race yesterday. He put Rachel Brown in, the second overall woman at ITTs, and she rode the rest of the race. I think that they wanted to get her out at some point, but ended up just saying, hey, finish it off. On the men's race, the Sig Epps did something similar with Nick Torrance, who we interviewed at the Open, and he rode the last 15 or 20 laps of that 2015 race and contended for the sprint with the win. But again, we're 28 laps to go. 28 laps is a lot of laps to ask for from one rider.
And we also saw Grey Goat exchange on the back stretch, and they're still kind of hanging in there as well. Phi Psi and Kappa Sig coming off the front now.
I'm impressed with Kappa Sig. Again, they qualified in the front row. They're in that 2 spot, and they are showing why they belong here.
Led by their captain, Jack Bossler, a senior. A couple seniors, a junior and a freshman, but definitely some experience there.
Jack's from St. Louis, Missouri. He's in his 3rd race. And experience plays a lot. There's only a handful of people that have 4 races under their belts. And we mentioned before, Joe Krahulik's one of them. And the more, you only get one shot at this, and you only get one shot to race. And the more experience that you have really shows come race day with the moves that you're able to make.
We just saw Kappa Sig make a exchange as well.
And now Cutter's getting out of the saddle and pushing it up possibly for an exchange.
So that's Cutters and Sig Ep along with Beta at the front. Bears is hanging in there as well. And let's send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more on SAE.
Thanks, Josh. I just talked with the guys at SAE, and they said they're going to probably make one more exchange before Joe finishes the race at the very end. They're not going to tell me who's going to come in the race, but they'll make that one last exchange and then hope Joe can finish them out. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Eddie, for that good piece of information. So we just saw Joe Carullo come on the bike. I asked the question, could that be it? But it doesn't look like it will. One more exchange, and it looks like they're starting to set up for it right now.
And now as we near the end of the race, it is the pace is obviously picked up. Our speed is fast, and there's really no advantage. There's no advantage in these exchanges of the teams. They've gotten pretty sloppy with their exchanges, so no discernible gap when they're bringing it in, just sort of off the front. So we saw the Sig Eps and the Cutters, and now just BKB did an exchange that was kind of parallel with the field. And as we come out of turn number 4, Sig Ep and SAEs are there together.
That's kind of been a battle there. Those two are right next to each other in the pits, and they've both been set up for exchanges on multiple occasions, but both have decided to go around again. Maybe it's one trying to play off the other.
I think that they're at least being partners for now, and they're trading poles and being cooperative with one another to establish some sort of a gap to be able to, again, shed some of those teams so it's not an 11-up sprint or a 10-up sprint, that we get it down, whittled down to something a little bit more reasonable.
It's like Ben Harris ready to come onto the bike for Sig Ep.
And the guys have the bikes out, but they continue to ride. So Joe, again, elects not to do that exchange right there.
Another significant moment in this bike race. Talk about the punches and counter punches thrown. We're seeing a bunch right in a row from these two teams, pitted 3 and 4 in this race coming in. But right now, they're off the front, and the rest of the pack just trying to stay up there with them. Jet Black right behind him, Bears as well. Delta Chi has done a solid job of hanging around as well. It looks like now they're both going to come in for an exchange.
So now they'll come back even with the field. And I really like what the Betas and the BKBs and the Cutters are doing. They just sort of sat in there, and there's a wreck right there.
A wreck. Sig Ep is down.
White jersey is down.
Sig Ep goes down. That is significant right after an exchange.
And Josh, I think that's going to be a catalyst. That will be a catalyst if the field realizes it.
It was behind the rest of the pack.
But
so
again,
if they don't see a white jersey in there.
all day long, they got right back up, and so he's immediately on the bike and fresh. So
how does this change their strategy now? Maybe want to set up more of a finish for their team. Now they have to play catch up and then finish.
And he was so quick to get up that you can already see him in the picture, and he's going to make it back to the tail end of that group. So a scary moment for the Sig Eps, one of our strongest teams coming into today, but being able to stay calm under pressure and get back to the front of the race.
180 laps scored, and now Cutters coming off the front and trying to burn for an exchange. They're setting up for it on the front stretch.
As well as deserving students on the
180 laps scored, less than 20 to go this time around, 19 to go this time around.
So it's Cutters coming in for an exchange. Blackie Bulls, Beta, Bears, Grey Goat. Jet Black is still in there.
And that was Ben Harris, the junior out of Indian Wells, California. That was the one that went down. But Ben was the 3rd place overall individual time trials. And, you know, if you're 3rd place overall and you go down, he proved his fitness of why he was 3rd place overall and was able to get back in less than a lap. He was back to the leaders.
And that's the great thing about Sig Ep this year is they have 3 elite riders in this race, all in the top 10. That's just got to test your mind a little bit, your psyche when you go down. How much strength do you have to come back up? As now Beta setting up for an exchange on the front stretch. And Beta's burning around turn 1 now.
And luckily, I don't think that Ben is necessarily their sprinter. Again, I think that if they were to go down to a sprint, they would want Charlie Hicks, who's got 2 years of race experience in 15 and 16, and he won our Missing Out event, and that's indicative of who has good pop for that final last lap.
And now we send it down to Eddie Cotton, who has more on Sig Ep.
Thank you very much, Josh. And you guys really hit that one right on the nose. Sig Ep going through that crash, but getting right back up and right in this competition. And what I asked about the strategy moving forward with that crash is they might look to a few more quicker exchanges, go for a few laps, make a change, go for a few laps and make a change. And when I asked about the race conditions and what they're seeing, they are not exactly a huge fan of what it's looking like. The temperatures have raised on the track, so it's more of a dry track that makes it feel almost like a dirt bike race, and that's going to be difficult for a lot of teams, and the key is going to be handling. Now, I asked them what their confidence level is in that handling, and they're feeling just fine, and they feel confident in their ability to adjust to the track and move forward. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Eddie. We were talking with Kappa Sig earlier before the race. They're saying they have some BMX riders, but as we see Jack
Developing
McNamara
right now, yeah.
way out in front, almost half a lap lead, as they had a very good burn and a good exchange, and now they are set up here with 184 laps scored.
And the Betas have ridden a terrific race all day long. They are really playing off what seems like a 2013 strategy. They had a great team pursuit that year. This year they were 4th overall in that event and just played it into the wind, and let's see what'll happen.
SAE looking like they're coming off the front along with SIGEP. So SIGEP put themselves in a solid position to get back in this race. SAE, it looks like they're gonna wait and they're gonna go at least one more. That's what the whiteboard says down there from the SAE coach. It says one more, SIGEP doing the same, but it's Beta right now way out in front of the pack. Black Key Bulls falling back a little bit along with Kappa Sigma. Phi-Psi also along in that pack with BKB. Now as they try to come around and catch up.
So a lot of solo riders right now, and a very hurried exchange. Oh gosh.
A bad exchange there from Beta.
Terrible exchange from Beta, but he was able to get it off.
Big lead.
I was going to say it was their own mechanic that almost impeded the progress, and Beta continues to go, so that's going to cost them a little bit of time.
They still had a huge lead, though, so it won't really affect them all too much as SAE makes that exchange. But Beta's still about a quarter of a lap ahead right now.
And in second are the SIGEPs. Bears are still up there, they're in the 3rd spot.
So SIGEP has done a great job getting back in this race.
And we've got, it's 187 scored for the Betas. So we're in less than 15 laps to go. Here comes SIG up for an exchange.
And that's now Tom Settle getting on the bike. But credit Ben Harris. I mean, he looks exhausted coming off, but he really got SIGEP back in this race to even give them a shot. And now we send it down to Eddie, who has more on Beta.
Thank you very much, Josh. I had a little conversation with some of the alumni over at Beta, and they mentioned how this strategy they're utilizing right now is the exact same way they won this race back in 2013. Send out your best sprinter when, as by quote, everyone else in the race is kind of sleeping. They're sending out Jack McNamara. He's on the bike right now for Beta. And also what I just saw previous to that move was a little bit of an altercation, not physical, just a bit yelling back and forth between the judge and a mechanic who had to bring in a bike there. So things are getting a little testy here on the field. Back to you.
Thank you, Eddie. 188 laps scored, and Beta still way out in front. What do you remember, though, from that 2013 race that Beta won?
It was just one of the most exciting races I've ever seen in person. They rode just such an expert race, and it ended up coming down. They exchanged lap 199 as about as late as you can. And as we're talking now, Xavier Martinez gets on the bike, and he's been as fresh all day, so I think that he'll be expected to close this down for the BKBs.
He's had one set today.
But as I said earlier, when the Jet Black guys were off the front, it's that rotation. Once you go through the first rotation, then it becomes very difficult to maintain it and keep it going.
As Beta makes an exchange, going on the bike now for Beta is Samuel Hagedorn, a sophomore. And now it's SIGEP out in front.
And SAE kind of exchanges off the bat. So SAE's putting on their number 3 rider, Sean Marks. 10 laps to go. 10 laps to go, and now it's about a half a straightaway.
Everybody is still chasing Beta, but in that second pack right now, you have SIGEP along with Delta Chi. Delta Chi hung in all day long, coming from that 11th spot with only 3 riders.
In addition to Grey Goat, you still have Cutters. Phi-Psi still there, and the Black Key Bulls at the tail end.
Here comes SIGEP, and it looks like they're going to fall back a little bit as Charlie Hicks coming onto the bike for Sig F. He's going to have some work to do. 191 laps scored. Could this be too late for Sig F?
Josh, like last year, in order to win the bike race, you have to get back up to the betas. And the betas right now are going all in. They are going all in and are the ones making the race. And you can't play too many, oh, you need to lead, you need to lead, you need to lead. That pack needs to get together, get organized, because we have 192 scored. We are coming to the end very quickly.
About a 9-second difference between Beta and the rest of the pack. The rest of the pack almost seems a little tired, as now SAE trying
Sean Marks of SAE goes to the front. He says, we need to do this. Let's go, guys. Let's go now. You got to go now.
But everybody is trying to catch Beta right now as they're setting up potentially for another exchange. It looks like this is just what they're doing, a lot of short sprints for everybody.
At the end of the race, they're trying to keep it hot, and they'll lose a little bit on the exchange, but they've kept it fast. So now this will bring it back to, as the Beta riders exchanging up to speed, that's Colton. He is going into turn number 1. The pack is coming out of turn number 4.
So about a quarter of a lap, just shy of a quarter of a lap, is the difference. 193 laps scored. Kappa Sigma has fallen well behind. Their day could be done. Pi Lambda Phi also well behind, but right now we're all keeping our eye on Beta Theta Pi coming around near towards turn 4.
And Eric Anderson out there animated. Their pit coach said, let's go. This is it. This is our strategy. This is how we want to win the race. 6 laps to go. You just need 6 more to hang on. Sean Marks doing a lot of work, not getting any help from anyone else. Behind him is Grey Goat. Logan Tisdale, freshman. So that might just be a little bit of inexperience on the Grey Goat part. He just doesn't pull through for Marks, and so that pack isn't working together effectively.
About a 10-second, that's unofficial, 10-second difference between Beta and the rest of the pack.
And as we come across the start-finish line for the Betas, this will be 5 laps to go. 195 scored, 5 laps to go at the start-finish line.
So 195 laps scored. It's been a race where it's been pretty close all day. It was slow for a while on a pretty nice day, but just shy of a 9-second difference now between Beta and the rest.
Grey Goat's really putting it down, probably coming in for an exchange. And now this gap is dwindling very quickly. So now it's way less than a half straightaway, and on the exchange, I think it will come back together.
So we saw Beta here in these last 10 to 7 laps really
Coach Anderson keeping him out. That was very, very savvy coaching by Coach Anderson to keep him out, because that exchange would have brought it back together.
So about a 3-second difference now. It is really dwindling down for Beta, and you just wonder how long they can stay in with all these sprints.
4 laps, less than 4 laps to go. We're on 196 scored. So I do think it will be a sprint, though. I think that Beta will be very comfortable on the front, and I would suspect he'll slot in for the sprint.
So we are setting up for a very exciting finish. 196 laps scored. Beta makes the exchange, bike-to-bike exchange.
And let's see, is he going to look behind his shoulder, or is he just going to run off the front?
And it looks like he's just going to go off the front. It's Jack McNamara.
197.
197. You can see the pace starting to pick up. They're trying to catch McNamara of Beta coming around turn 2. It's getting really close now as SAE, Bears, Black Key Bulls are all playing catch-up along with Phi-Psi.
And I really like the position of Xavier Martinez. He's been following wheels this whole time, as has Sig Up, as have the Cutters, those 3 teams. And so it's all back together. And when we come across the line, it'll be 2 to go until the finish.
Joker Hulick's on the bike for SAE. On the bike for Beta is Jack McNamara. Riley Fig on the bike for Bears. And boy, do we have a finish now with Jet Black making a move to take the lead. But Beta has fallen back. 198 laps scored. We're about to see the white flag.
Upon the start-finish line, Chappie Black will give them the, yep.
Now it's Sig Epp. Just a whole lot of change at the top right now.
Sig Epp goes to the front. Charlie Hicks leading it out.
Who is it going to
BKB.
be? Now it's BKB as we are about to see the white flag from Chappie Blackwell. This is going to be the bike race, and what a finish we have. Here comes Grey Goat. It's Cutters as well. Black Key Bulls and Sig Epp following right behind, but it's Cutters and Grey Goat. They lead going into turn 2. Sam Stratton on the bike right now for Grey Goat. He's trying to pull, but it's Cutters pulling ahead. Cutters, the leaders coming around turn 3. Now it's Grey Goat catching up. Black Key Bulls on the inside. It's a sprint to the finish for the 68th Little 500, and it's going to be Cutters. Cutters are back on top. What a finish here at Bill Armstrong.
14th victory all time. Pole team, start number 1, finish number 1.
Wow, just like we saw yesterday, an incredible finish. So many teams up at the top. So many teams could have finished right there, but Grey Goat, you have to feel for them. They had their A guy out there in Sam Stratton, and he barely, and I mean barely, finishes in second, but it's Cutters who gives it to the independent teams for a second straight year.
Another independent team sweep, so we shuffled around a little bit. Cutters move up into that top spot. Grey Goat Cycling lost 3 riders from last year's race and were able to repeat in that number 2 spot. BKB falls to number 3 overall.
So it's the pole team in Cutters that comes away with the win. And how
Noble Guyan
about
finishing
that?
it off for them. Junior out of Lanesville, Indiana. To get a little bit deeper now, Cutters in that first spot, of course. Finishing second was Grey Goat. In third, Black Key Bulls. In fourth, Sigma Phi Epsilon. In fifth, SAE. And in sixth, Jet Black.
So Eddie Cotton trying to catch up with them down there over in turn 1. And we're going to send it down to Eddie Cotton.
Gentlemen, what does it mean to have won the Little 500?
Greg, you're the spokesman. It's wonderful. I'm happy. I'm happy to be here with my team. We worked hard and we're glad with the outcome. Happy to be here.
You put in all this work to get here. What does it mean to have had your work worth it?
We won with the guy with the torn meniscus, if that tells you anything. This guy put the fucking team on his back. Sorry, excuse my French. All of these guys, this isn't be in the position to win. And I did what I was supposed to do. We came out and we did our jobs. Anyone who doubted us, we're back. 13. That's 13.
Well, welcome back. That last sprint, what goes through your head, all of you, on that last sprint?
We're all there together.
Perfect. Thank you. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you very much, Eddie. A very jubilant team down there in Cutters. The pole team gets the win. And how about that? Sig Epp finishes 4th, SAE in 5th, but what we saw here was just absolute chaos in the last 20 laps.
To end the race, the Betas were the one that really threw it all out there, and they were able to establish over a straightaway lead, and that really kind of made everything crazy. And so all sprinters all got on, and it came back together at the end. Going into the white flag, Black Key Bulls led it across the line, followed by Sig Epp, but it was the Grey Goat and the Cutter rider, Noble Guyan, went to the front, and they got a sizable gap, and boy, did Grey Goat make it a close race. Less than a half a second was the differential between first and second.
Absolutely incredible. And Beta, they finished all the way back in 8th, so you just wonder if you didn't go for all those sprints, maybe you'd be there at the end, but I feel like they didn't really have any other choice.
Yeah, and for them, it probably was a matter of they just didn't necessarily want to do a sprint and wanted to win off the front, but didn't quite have the horsepower to get it done today. And they definitely changed the dynamic of the race, and they made it hard at the end. And it was they left it to the other teams to have to catch back up to them and if they wanted to win. So those teams did that, and Cutters rode very, very intelligently, where they were not necessarily doing the work to bring it back, but following those wheels and keeping themselves in a good position to eventually bridge back to the Betas so that they could contend for the sprint.
So we get you our top 10 here. It goes Cutters, Grey Goat, and BKB. That is your all-independent podium once again for the second straight year. Then it's followed by SIGEP, Jet Black, SAE, Bears, Beta, Phi Psi, 3PH, and Delta Chi in 11th. Kappa Sig falls all the way back to 13th. Sig Chi also in 14th. A couple more teams of note. But that was an absolute sprint to the finish. It was kind of a crazy bike race in the fact that it got so slow for a while, and then all of a sudden, these last 50 laps, kind of like we expected, really, really picked up.
And you can see the pictures of the Cutters guys, and again, another team with so much history and tradition in this race. They have so many alumni that make it back and help to support the riders on the bike. And it's more than just one team, more than just the riders. It's a whole team and a cast of characters that help lead them to victory today.
And Eddie is standing by with another Cutters member.
I'm here with Coach. What went into the thought process down that final sprint?
It was quite chaotic. We had to put our top guy on 20 laps to go because the race was getting dicey, with fragile, and we feared one more exchange would just put us off the back and unable to catch up. Noble guy in said, I got it from here, I'll do it, I'll put me in with 20 to go, which is really unheard of. And he rode the last 20 laps really patiently because there were a couple teams up the road. He was patient. And he found himself in pretty poor position there with 2 to go, and we're getting worried. But he found an opening, and he got clear track ahead of him, and he rode the sprint exactly how he said he was going to.
Now we heard Noble say it at the end of the race. We're back. What does it feel like to be back?
It's a great team. We've won 13 times. We've had a few years where we've been competitive, but nothing's better than a victory. It's to consolidate the alumni and the supporters. It's to keep everybody tight. It's really for us. We're back. Not that we left, but we're just really thrilled, obviously, for all the work these kids have done, and the belief they had in themselves is amazing.
Thank you very much, Coach. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And like Coach Jim Kirkham just mentioned, the 13th win for Cutters. I mean, just an absolute dynasty of the Little 500.
Yeah, first since 2011. So it had been quite some time, and they will be very pleased with that. That's a program with so much history and tradition.
And now the podium teams are coming up to the stage to accept their trophies. And Black Key Bulls, obviously the team who won it last year. They will be dethroned, I guess you could say.
And they had three
effort.
seniors putting in a great effort today. And to look back over the history of their career, they continue to be a dominant team. And so this will be a catalyst for them to continue to be hungry to win the race and pursue to win the race in the next years to come.
So for Black Key Bulls, it'll be Kevin Mangle, Will Ottenweller, and Noah Voiles all departing for BKB. But Xavier Martinez will presumably be back next year.
And really tough for the seniors especially. Joe Krahulik, another one from the SAEs, just a really gutted out race. They rode a great race and wasn't quite able to get it done with him. But with younger brother Rob, there's still hope alive now for the Krahulik family.
And now Grey Goat taking to the podium now. Sam Stratton was pulling that last lap for them and all the way to that sprint finish. Logan Tisdale, Jack Dunsford, and Steve Schaefer. Tisdale and Dunford, both freshmen. Schaefer, a junior.
3 Indiana guys and a guy from D.C. And they could potentially be the Dixie Highway Award starting in the 14th spot and moving all the way up to 2nd to finish the race. And again, great. This is their 11th appearance in the Little 500, and as we mentioned at the Open, 2nd was their highest finish last year, so now they have 2 seconds and just things to build off of.
And now we are awaiting Cutters coming up to the podium. You see just those basic white T-shirts with the black block lettering across the front that says Cutters.
86, 88, 92, 97.
Chuck Crabb lists all of the Cutters title years, and you can add 2018 to that.
07, 08, 09, 10, and 11. Now you can add.
And again, Noble Guyan was on the bike at the end for them. But you've got Will Hubricks, the sophomore from Zionsville, Indiana, Eric Schwedland, who is from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Patrick Coulter, the sophomore from Mishawaka, Indiana. Solid team, and they just got it done today.
And they'll get 3 riders back next year. It'll only be Schwedland leaving them. And you might have heard it there in that interview, but it sounded like he was riding with a torn meniscus today. So how about that? There was uncertainty as to whether he would be in the final 4 riders for Cutters. But I'm sure it was all worth it for him to now lift that Borg Warner trophy, which they'll get momentarily.
Most certainly. And again, up there on stage with them, just a lot of the Cutters alum that have gone through the programs themselves and continue to come back and continue to help out and guide the young guys to a victory today.
But it was Noble Guyan on the bike at the end. Absolutely an incredible finish. It was a sprint finish. They finished probably a wheel ahead of Grey Goat. And for Grey Goat, they got ever so close this year. For Sam Stratton, it's gotta hurt. Now,
but again, for them, they've got a program to build off of. So they've got 3 returning riders. Sam Stratton graduates, obviously, but a lot of positivity in the future. As they hoist the Borg Warner Trophy, the replica trophy, the same as the winning trophy at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Indy 500.
So there they go with that trophy, the Borg Warner Trophy, what everybody was vying for. But last year it was the 8th team in Black Key Bulls that won this thing. This year it's the #1 team, the pole team in Cutters that comes away with the victory. And now they'll lift that little 500 Schwinn bicycle.
Patrick Coulter, Mishawaka sophomore. Team called the Cutters.
So they got the Borg Warner Trophy, and here they go, the bike in the air. And Jordan, I guess as we are nearing our sign-off, just final thoughts from this exciting 68th running.
Josh, it was another good one. I'm very happy to be back. The pageantry didn't fail. The bike race didn't fail. We got everything we wanted and more, and it'll keep on going. We'll be back next year. The Cutters will be back next year. The Black Key Bulls will be back next year. So here's to 365 more days to go.
So for Director Cameron Spar, Assistant Director Olivia Pavich, Galen Clavio, Eric Garabrandt, our entire broadcast crew, Eddie Cotton down in the field, my partner Jordan Bailey, I'm Josh Eastern saying so long from the 68th running of the men's Little 500.